Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the true master of Chaldea with the power of the sage Naruto x Jalter. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sage in the Snow. The concept of time held no purchase in the final silence. It was a theoretical quantity, a ghost of a principle that had died along with the last ticking clock, the last heartbeat. The last gust of wind through the skeletal branches of a petrified forest. Here, at the heat death of a universe, there was only dust. Not the vibrant, chaotic dust of a bustling world, but the settled, uniform dust of everything that had ever been, ground down to its most fundamental and impotent state. It coated the surface of a dead sphere that no longer remembered its name was Earth, a silent, tea-gray blanket over forgotten mountains and evaporated oceans. Upon the highest peak of what was once a mighty range, a figure sat in the cross-legged posture of meditation. He did not feel the non-existent wind, nor did he mind the eternal twilight cast by a long-dead star. His name was Naruto Uzumaki, though the name felt like an echo from someone else's life, a story read in a book so ancient its pages had turned to the very dust surrounding him. He wore simple, dark trousers and a high-collared, long-sleeved black shirt, unadorned and perfectly preserved. His hair, the color of a sun he could only faintly recall, was short, practical. His skin was tanned, a testament to a life lived under that forgotten star. His eyes were closed, but even in stillness, his presence was the only thing in this dead reality that felt real. He was the sole exception to the universal rule of entropy. A single, stubborn point of life in an ocean of absolute death. Centuries, millennia, he had lost count. The long, slow, agonizing fate of his world had been a trial far crueler than any war. He had fought gods and demons, men and monsters. He had brought peace to a world of endless conflict, united nations under a banner of hope. And watched as his friends lived, loved, grew old, and passed into memory. He had outlived them all. He had outlived their children, and their children's children. He had become a living monument. The Sage of Six Paths, the Jinchuriki of the complete 10 Tales, a being who had touched the wellspring of creation and, in doing so, had untethered himself from the mortal coil. Immortality was a curse sold as a gift. It was the price he paid for the power to protect everyone, only to be left with no one to protect. His power, once a brilliant, roaring sun of chakra, was now a calm, deep, silent ocean within him. It needed no fuel. It simply was, like him, a flicker of memory, unbidden. The taste of miso pork broth, rich and salty. The hearty laugh of a silver-haired pervert. The scent of old books and the gentle smile of a pink-haired woman. The gruff, rumbling voice of his other half, Kurama, a constant companion now long silenced, his chakra integrated into Naruto's own being so completely that they were one. These memories were no longer sharp with pain. They were like watercolor paintings left in the rain, their colors bleeding into a soft, sorrowful blur. He was the curator of a museum to which he was the only visitor. He breathed in, an act of sheer habit. The air was thin, inert, holding nothing. He breathed out. This was his existence, a vigil over a tomb the size of a planet. It was then that something impossible happened. In the silent, unchanging void before his closed eyes, a flicker. It was not light. It was a visual representation of a sound that could not be made. A tear, a tiny, hairline fracture in the placid fabric of his dead reality. His eyes snapped open. The right was a brilliant azure blue, as clear and deep as the oceans of memory. The left was something else entirely. It was a pale, transcendent lavender, patterned with concentric rings, upon which 9 red tomo were etched like sacred calligraphy. The Rinne Sharingan, the eye that could perceive the very flow of energy, the building blocks of reality, the hidden truths of the universe. And it was showing him an error. A bug in the code of existence. The fracture was a point of utter wrongness. It bled a faint, chaotic energy that his senses had never before encountered. It was not chakra. It was something cruder, yet potent. A raw, untamed force. The tear widened, infinitesimally, and the non-existent space around it warped, bending the light of distant, dead galaxies that were only visible to his divine sight. He rose to his feet, a smooth, silent motion. The dust at his feet did not stir. His truth-seeking orbs, 10 spheres of absolute blackness that hovered in a halo behind his back, shifted slightly, resonating with their master's curiosity. These orbs were the embodiment of his power over yin-yang release, capable of negating any energy, any ninjutsu, anything they touched. They hummed with a low, inaudible thrum, wary of the anomaly. This was the first new thing to happen in 10,000 years. Wariness warred with a feeling so old he barely recognized it, a spark of interest. He had watched his world die. He had sat in the ashes, waiting to see what came next. And the answer had been nothing. For ages, the answer was nothing. But this was something. He took a step, then another, his feet making no sound on the gray dust. He floated towards the shimmering tear, his sage's cloak, a manifestation of his own power, billowing softly behind him. As he drew closer, he could feel it. A pull, a summons. It was not targeted, not a technique aimed at him. It was more like a drowning man flailing in the water, his hand accidentally closing on a solid rock. He was the rock, and something on the other side was drowning. He reached out a hand, not to touch the tear, but to feel its texture on the currents of reality. It was raw, violent, and desperate. A reality in turmoil, a place of sound and fury, a place that was alive. What was left for him here? More millennia of watching dust settle. He had mourned, he had grieved, he had accepted. All that was left was a profound, soul-deep emptiness. Perhaps, on the other side of this impossibility, there was a purpose, or perhaps, there was only a different kind of oblivion. Either was a change of scenery. With a final, fleeting thought of a smiling, whiskered face in a mirror, a younger, more vibrant version of himself, he made his choice. He let the anomaly's pull take him. The universe of his birth did not protest. It simply let its last, lonely god go. The sensation was not of movement, but of deconstruction. He was pulled apart and reassembled in an instant that felt like an eternity. For a being like him, who could perceive the flow of time down to the smallest instant, it was a nauseating, disorienting ride through the raw guts of space-time. Then, the void spit him out, and he arrived in hell. The transition from absolute silence to absolute chaos was a physical blow. Roaring fires, creaming metal, Tyran galar ms blaring garange, white hot flashing red lights, these mel off burning wires and cooked me athi pressure wave, a cosmic hammer blouth bitter cold ofex posed vacuum. Naruto's senses, honed to perceive the most subtle fluctuations in the natural world, were overwhelmed. It was a cacophony of pure, violent stimuli. His first instinct, born of 1,000 battles, was to erect a defensive perimeter. His second, born of centuries of wisdom, was to understand. His mind, a fortress of calm in the hurricane of sensation, asserted control. The world snapped into focus, but it was a focus alien to any normal being. Time did not stop. It simply yielded. The roaring inferno slowed to a majestic, horrifying ballet. The shriek of tearing metal became a deep, resonant groan that stretched for an eternity. The screams of dying people became drawn out, ghostly wails that hung in the air like funeral shrouds. Particles of dust and shrapnel, propelled by the explosion, drifted lazily through the air. Each one a miniature comet in a universe of fire. He was floating in the center of what looked like a command and control center. Consoles, once sleek and advanced, were twisted into jagged sculptures of molten metal. Wires sparked, their electrical discharge crawling through the air like lazy lightning. And bodies were thrown about like dolls, frozen in the moment of their obliteration. His Rinne Sharingan drank it all in, processing trillions of data points in a single, silent moment. Analysis. Central hub of a large, high-energy facility. Location appears to be subterranean or otherwise isolated. Energy source of the explosion is not chakra-based. It is a form of controlled magical energy, twisted into a bomb. Deliberate sabotage. His gaze swept across the room, past the dead and dying. His senses seeking the architect of this destruction. He found him. A man with ashen hair, wearing glasses, a smug, self-satisfied smirk on his face as he watched his handiwork unfold. The man, Lev Lanor, was surrounded by a faint aura of malevolent energy, utterly alien to this place. A traitor. Naruto filed the information away. The man was a target, but not the priority. The priority was life. His senses expanded, passing through walls of burning steel and concrete. He felt the structure of the entire facility groaning, protesting its own imminent collapse. He felt the thrum of a massive, spherical object at the facility's core. Chaldeas, the system logs on a nearby, melting console called it destabilizing. He felt the life force of hundreds of people, already extinguished. But there were survivors, a handful, clustered together. His eyes focused on them, a small pocket of terrified life cowering behind a summoning circle. A young woman with silver hair and regal, if terrified, features. Wearing a pristine white uniform, Olga Marie Animosphere. A lanky, orange-haired man in a doctor's coat, his face a mask of abject horror, Romani Archaman. And between them, a girl. She wore a strange, skin-tight black suit and had lilac hair covering one eye. Her life force was odd. A fragile human soul intertwined with something immense, ancient, and noble. A heroic spirit, but the fusion was flawed. Unstable, like two magnets being forced together with the wrong poles facing. She was dying, not from the explosion, but from her own existence. In her eyes, behind the thick glasses, was a terror so profound it was almost beautiful. Mash Kyrie and they were all about to be consumed. A secondary wave of the explosion, a curtain of pure heat and force, was crawling towards them. Even in the slowed time frame, it was mere feet away. Naruto did not deliberate. His purpose, the one he had thought lost forever, flared to life within him. Protect. One of the 10 black spheres behind his back detached from its halo. It shot forward, not with speed, but with a simple repositioning of its existence. One moment it was behind him, the next it was in front of the cowering group. As it moved, it flattened, expanded, and thinned, losing its spherical shape to become a perfect, circular shield of absolute nothingness. The curtain of fire, a wall of plasma hot enough to vaporize steel, slammed into the truth-seeking shield, and vanished. There was no impact, no sound, no heat transfer. The fire, the force, the shrapnel, anything that touched the shield simply ceased to be. It was not blocked or deflected, its existence was negated. On the other side of the black shield, the 3 survivors were untouched, their world of roaring death having been replaced by an impossible, silent safety. From their perspective, one moment death was upon them, the next a perfect circle of black had appeared, swallowing the apocalypse. Olga Marie's scream caught in her throat. Romani's knees buckled. Mash stared, her single visible eye wide, as she saw the figure floating in the heart of the inferno on the other side of the shield. Naruto's attention was already elsewhere. The shield was a temporary, passive measure. The source of the problem remained. His Rinne Sharingan located the core of the magical bomb, still pulsing with destructive energy, preparing for a final facility-leveling detonation. He raised his right hand, his palm open. The space directly in front of the bomb's core shimmered, distorted, and then tore open, creating a swirling vortex of blackness. A pinhole into another dimension. It was not the chaotic, violent tear that had brought him here. This was controlled, precise, a surgeon's incision into the fabric of reality. With a subtle push of his will, he nudged the bomb's core. It drifted silently into the portal. Then, with a thought, he sealed the portal shut. The bomb, and its catastrophic potential, was gone, shunted int. Oh, an empty void between worlds where it could detonate harmlessly for the rest of eternity. The immediate threat was neutralized. The secondary threat, the facility's total collapse, remained. The sphere at its heart, Chaldeas, was flickering like a dying star. The energy conduits that powered the entire base, the life support, the very reality anchors that kept it stable in the Antarctic wasteland, were failing. This required a broader touch. He brought his hands together in front of his chest, palms facing each other. He closed his eyes, his sage's markings, black lines extending over his eye lids and down his cheeks, seeming to darken. He was not gathering energy, he was commanding it. Within him, the concepts of yin, the representation of form, imagination, and the spiritual, and yang, the representation of life, vitality, and the physical, churned. He was reaching for the foundational power that the Sage of Six Paths had used to create the 9-tailed beasts from the 10 tails chakra. The creation of all things. He pushed that power outwards. It was not a wave of chakra. It was not a visible pulse of light. It was a command issued to the universe. A whisper that said, "Heal." And reality obeyed. For the survivors huddled behind the black shield, the miracle was absolute and incomprehensible. The fire did not extinguish, it retreated. Flames that were consuming consoles and melting bulkheads seemed to flow in reverse, drawing back into the walls and ceiling, leaving behind not scorched, blackened metal, but pristine, clean surfaces. Twisted girders and beams groaned, not in collapse, but in reformation, straightening themselves, weaving back into a solid, supportive framework. Shattered screens and displays flowed back together like liquid mercury, the cracks vanishing until they were seamless, dark mirrors. The emergency lights, flashing a frantic, terrifying red, flickered once, twice, and then settled into a steady, calm, operational white. The very air changed. The acrid stench of ozone and burning materials was replaced by the clean, sterile, filtered scent of a high-tech facility. The ground, which had been shaking violently, became utterly still. The blaring, cacophonous alarms stuttered, their wails dying down one by one until the only sound was the gentle, rhythmic hum of a fully powered and stable system. Naruto floated in the center of the now pristine command room. He had not just stopped the destruction, he had erased it. He had rewound time on the physical matter of the room, restoring it to its state before the betrayal. He could feel the pulse of Chaldeas stabilizing, its deep blue light returning to a healthy, steady glow. He could feel the life support systems re-engaging across the entire facility. He had grabbed the entire, sprawling complex at the moment of its death and breathed life back into its metallic lungs. His work done, he let his feet touch the polished floor. He made no sound. The truth-seeking shield in front of the survivors dissolved back into a sphere and floated serenely back to join the halo behind him. The silence that followed was more profound than the chaos that had preceded it. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated awe and terror. The minds of the few who had witnessed this event struggled to comprehend what they had just seen. It was not Magecraft as they knew it. Magecraft manipulated existing laws, it bent reality. It did not hold reality down and rewrite it on a whim. That was the domain of a god. And a god had just appeared in their command room. Naruto's gaze swept over them. He saw Olga Marie, her aristocratic pride shattered, leaving only trembling disbelief. He saw Romani, looking like he was about to faint, his face pale as a sheet. And he saw Mash, her knuckles white where she gripped a massive, unseen shield. Her one visible violet eye fixed on him, filled not just with fear, but with a dawning, desperate hope. He took a single, slow step towards them. The motion was fluid, effortless. His sage's cloak settled around him. In the clean, white light of the restored command room, they could see him clearly for the first time. The strange, powerful eye. The markings on his face. The 10 floating black orbs that seemed to drink the very light around them. But most awful, they saw the expression in his azure eye. It was not the triumphant look of a hero, nor the smug look of a deity. It was an expression of profound, ancient sadness, tempered by a quiet, unshakable resolve. The look of a man who had seen the end of everything and had decided to start again. Olga Marie finally found her voice. Though it was a mere tremor, a fragile thing in the heavy silence. "Who? What? Are you?" Naruto's gaze met hers. His voice, when it came, was calm, even, and resonated not with volume, but with an intrinsic power that vibrated in their very bones. It was the voice of a lonely king, a forgotten warrior, a wandering sage. "My name is Naruto. It would seem you are in need of assistance." Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Foundation of Truth and Steel. The silence that followed Naruto's introduction was a fragile, crystalline thing, threatening to shatter at the slightest provocation. In the pristine, unnaturally quiet command room, every breath seemed deafening. The staff, who had been moments from a fiery death, stood frozen, their gazes locked on the blonde-haired Ma. And who was both their savior and the greatest mystery they had ever encountered. His presence was a paradox, calm and gentle, yet radiating an ancient pressure that made the very air feel heavy. It was Olga Marie Animosphere who broke the spell. Her Animosphere pride, a thing forged in the crucible of mage society and tempered by a lifetime of expectation, reasserted itself. It was the only shield. She had left against the tide of incomprehensible events. She straightened her back, smoothed down her immaculate white uniform, a uniform that by all rights should have been ash, and took a sharp, commanding step forward. "That is not an answer," she snapped, her voice regaining some of its familiar aristocratic steel, though a faint tremor betrayed the terror still gripping her. "You will identify yourself, your lineage, your affiliation. By what right do you stand in the command center of the Chaldea Security Organization? Under whose authority do you operate? The UN, the Clock Tower, Atlas. Speak, now." Her questions were a barrage, a desperate attempt to frame the impossible event within the familiar context of her world, a world of rules, hierarchies, and political maneuvering. A man of this power had to belong to someone. Naruto simply watched her, his expression unchanging. His azure eye held a deep-seated patience, like a mountain observing a fleeting storm on its slopes. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he repeated, his voice even. "I have no lineage you would recognize and no affiliation with any of your organizations. I operate under my own authority. As for my right to be here, I was brought here. And I stopped your home from being turned into a crater. I would think that grants me some small allowance." His reply was simple, devoid of sarcasm, yet it systematically dismantled her entire framework of authority. He wasn't playing her game. He wasn't even on the same board. "Impossible," Olga Marie retorted, her face flushing with a mixture of anger and frustration. Omegas operates independently at this level. The power you just displayed, it's beyond a servant, beyond even true magic. It is a violation of established principles. You must be accounted for." Before Naruto could respond, the lanky, orange-haired doctor, Romani Archaman, stepped forward, holding up his hands placatingly. His face was still pale, but a doctor's professionalism was beginning to override his panic. "Director, please," he said, his voice shaky but clear. "Maybe we should focus on the immediate situation. We have casualties. The staff in Blocks C and D, the other master candidates," his voice trailed off. The sheer scale of the tragedy sinking in. Naruto's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Romani. He gave a slow, solemn nod. "He is right. Your dead need attending to. Your wounded need treatment. And your living," he said, his eyes sweeping across the room to include the stunned technicians and engineers, "need answers about what to do next. Your arguments of lineage can wait. The world is burning." Quote. This simple, pragmatic statement had a greater effect than any of Olga Marie's demands. It grounded them, the technicians, who had been staring blankly at their perfectly restored consoles. Began to move. One of them tentatively tapped at a screen. His eyes widened. "Director, I have telemetry," he stammered. "All systems are green. Not just green, they're optimal. Power flow is at 102% of theoretical maximum. The structural integrity scans are perfect. Chaldea's, its energy state is more stable than it was before. Every head turned back to Naruto. It was one thing to see the miracle, it was another to have it quantified by their own technology. He hadn't just patched the system, he had improved it. Naruto walked past the director, his steps silent on the polished floor, and approached the main holographic display at the center of the room. It showed a massive, deep blue sphere, crisscrossed with lines of light, Chaldea's, their model of Earth's soul. "It is stable, for now," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the hologram. "But the external pressure is immense. Your reality anchors are strained." Olga Marie scoffed, taking the bait. "Our reality anchors are state-of-the-art, derived from the Atlas Institute. They are more than capable of. They are capable of maintaining this facility's existence against temporal paradoxes within a stable timeline." Naruto interrupted, not unkindly. He pointed a finger at the sphere, and a ripple of golden energy flowed from his fingertip, highlighting specific data streams on the hologram. That their own software hadn't even flagged as critical. They are not designed to withstand the complete incineration of the planet's history. You are no longer an observation post on a shoreline. You are a lifeboat in a typhoon. And your anchor is dragging. The head engineer stared, his mouth agape. The data he's highlighting, it's a cascade failure I hadn't even projected to be possible. The sheer taumaturgical pressure, how can you even read that? Before Naruto could answer, a new voice joined the conversation, bubbly and filled with an infectious, effervescent curiosity. By you, sing a sensory mechanism that is utterly sublime, of course. Oh, bravo, bellissimo, an artist's touch on a canvas of quantum foam. A pillar of light resolved near the console, coalescing into the elegant, androgynous form of a caster-class servant with flowing auburn hair and a grin that could charm the stars from the sky. Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci, Romani exclaimed in relief. You're all right. Of course, my dear Roman, she said with a flourish, striking a dramatic pose. My workshop is designed to withstand a bit of thaumaturgical roughhousing. But I must confess, the energy signature I just witnessed has rendered all my prior research obsolete. A complete restoration of matter and energy on a macro scale, without a single trace of ether in the formula. It's like watching someone paint the Mona Lisa with a supernova and not singe the canvas. You, sir, she said, her brilliant eyes locking onto Naruto, her grin widening, are the most fascinating enigma I have ever encountered. Naruto met her gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips for the first time. He recognized her type instantly, the obsessive, brilliant mind that saw the universe as a puzzle to be solved. It is a type of energy, he explained simply, deciding to give them a starting point. In my world, we called it chakra. Chakra, Da Vinci repeated, tasting the word. Fascinating. Not magical energy, but life energy. Directed by will and spirit. A perfect fusion of the physical and spiritual. Oh, the applications. The potential. We must discuss this at length. I have 1,000 questions. Olga Marie, seeing the conversation slipping completely out of her control and into the hands of her most eccentric servant, slammed her hand down on the console rail. Enough. I don't care if he did it with chakra or divine intervention. What about the outside world? What is the status of Earth? Give me a planetary scan. A technician's fingers flew across a keyboard. Trying. Director, but it's nothing. It's all static. It's like the entire planet just switched off. The residual fear returned to the room, colder than the Antarctic winds outside. They were truly, utterly alone. Not switched off, Naruto said quietly. His brief moment of levity with Da Vinci gone, replaced by the somber weight of his knowledge. He closed his eyes. The black markings over his eyelids stood out starkly against his skin. The Rinne Sharingan beneath the lid pulsed with power, its senses expanding beyond the confines of Chaldea, beyond the Antarctic, spreading like a blanket over the entire globe in an instant. What he saw, he had seen once before. An echo of his own world's death. He began to speak, his voice a low, steady monotone, a narrator describing the end of all things. The surface the planet is a uniform layer of incinerated matter. All life, organic and inorganic, has been burned to cinders. There is no atmosphere. There is no magnetic field. The oceans are gone. It is a perfect, sterile sphere of ash. The timeline of humanity, from its dawn to its future, has been consumed by fire. Each word was a hammer blow to the hope of the survivors. Romani staggered back, clutching his chest. Olga Marie's face went bone white, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling into dust. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. It is your reality, Naruto continued, his voice unrelenting. However, the incineration is not absolute. It is a present state layered over a past that still exists, albeit as a phantom. I can sense errors, points in your history that burn brighter than the rest. They are like tumors on the timeline, festering wounds that are poisoning your past and ensuring this future. Singularities, 7 of them. He opened his eyes, his gaze distant, as if he were looking at a map only he could see. A city in Japan, 2004. An empire in Europe, year 60. A continent-spanning conflict in the 15th century. He continued to list them, not by name, but by their temporal and energetic signature, painting a picture of their quest for them. When he finished, the room was utterly silent once more. He had not just confirmed their fears, he had laid out the entire crisis. The nature of their enemy, and the path of their war with a clarity their billion-dollar equipment could no longer provide. In that moment, the power struggle was over. Olga Marie Animosphere might hold the title of director, but the man standing before them, this impossible being named Naruto, was the one who held their survival in his hands. He was their censor, their oracle. and their ultimate weapon, all in one. He turned his attention from the hologram and let his gaze fall upon the one person who had remained silent through the entire exchange. The girl with the lilac hair, Mash Kyrillite, who was still standing by Romani, her hands clasped in front of her, her one visible eye staring at him with a complex storm of fear, awe, and a desperate, fragile hope. "Dr. Archaman," Naruto said, his voice now gentle, "you should examine your patient. I will join you." The medical bay was an oasis of sterile white in the damaged facility. While Naruto had restored the command room's functionality, the rest of Chaldea still bore the scars of the explosion. Here, however, things were mostly intact, a testament to its reinforced structure. The clean scent of antiseptic was a sharp contrast to the lingering, imagined smell of smoke. Mash sat on the edge of an examination bed, her posture stiff. Romani fussed with a series of holographic monitors, earlier panic channeled into a flurry of professional activity. Olga Marie stood near the doorway, arms crossed, a silent and uncertain observer. "Her vitals are chaotic," Romani murmured, analyzing the data streams. "Heart rate is elevated, cellular degradation is accelerating. Mash, the spiritual resonance with your servant it's highly unstable. Every moment you maintain this state, it's putting an incredible strain on your body. At this rate," he trailed off, unable to voice the grim prognosis. "She has weeks, perhaps," Naruto said, finishing the thought. He stood not by the monitors, but near the bed, his attention focused solely on Mash. If she engages in combat, days. If she deploys her noble phantasm, minutes. His diagnosis was blunt, yet his tone was devoid of clinical detachment. It was a statement of fact, delivered with an undercurrent of empathy that made it all the more chilling. Mash flinched, her hands tightening in her lap. She looked down, her lilac bangs obscuring her expression completely. She had always known she was a disposable asset, an experiment with a tragically short shelf life. To hear it laid so bare was still a fresh kind of pain. "We can manage it," Olga Marie interjected, her voice strained. "With proper energy management, inhibitors. You can delay the inevitable," Naruto corrected her gently. "You are putting a bandage on a severed limb. You are treating the symptom, not the cause." He pulled a small stool over and sat down, bringing himself to Mash's eye level. This simple act of humility shifted the entire dynamic of the room. He was not a god passing judgment. He was a person offering to talk. "Mash Kyrillite, may I speak with you alone?" Olga Marie looked indignant, ready to protest, but one look from Romani silenced her. The doctor gave a slight nod, his eyes conveying a simple message: let him try. He quietly ushered the director out of the room, closing the door behind them and leaving Naruto and Mash in the quiet, sterile space. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Naruto simply sat there, patiently waiting, allowing her the time to gather her thoughts. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Mash spoke. "You can see it, can't you, Uzumaki-san? The flaw in me." "I can," he replied softly. "And I see no flaw. I see a girl who was forced to carry a burden she was never designed for." He raised a hand, and a soft, golden glow enveloped it. "May I?" Hesitantly, Mash nodded. He placed his glowing hand just above her sternum, not touching her, but allowing his chakra to flow around her. His eyes closed. "Your Chaldean doctors see an unstable fusion of a human and a heroic spirit. They are not wrong, but their language is imprecise. What I see." He paused, searching for the right words. "Imagine two complex gears, with thousands of teeth. They were not designed to work together. They were slammed into one another in a moment of crisis. And now, they are grinding against each other. Every rotation, every movement, every thought, they shave off a microscopic piece of each other. That is what is happening to your soul, and to the soul of the hero within you. The friction is shredding your life force." Mash listened, captivated. No one had ever explained it like that. They had used terms like biorhythm mismatch and spiritual dissonance. He made it sound tragic and understandable. "The hero inside you, his name is Galahad," Naruto continued, his voice a low murmur. "He is noble, he is trying to protect you, but his very nature, when forced against yours, is what is hurting you. He is a shield of absolute conceptual defense. Your body and soul are the anchors for that concept. And the anchor is cracking. A single tear traced a path down Mash's cheek. So, I am a failed experiment, she whispered. The words tasting like poison. No, Naruto said, his voice firm, drawing her gaze up. His azure eye was filled with a powerful certainty. You are an incomplete creation. And anything that is incomplete can be finished. He drew his hand back. The technique I used to repair the command room, it is called the creation of all things. It uses spiritual and physical energy to breathe life into form. It can create something from nothing. It is a power meant to build, not destroy. He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest, his voice dropping to an intimate, sincere register. I cannot fix you in a day, Mash. The damage is too deep, the process too delicate. To force it would be like trying to hammer those gears together, it would only shatter them. But, if you allow me, I can begin a process. In sessions, bit by bit, I can use my chakra to gently coax the teeth of those gears to mesh. I can reshape the spiritual fabric of your soul and Galahad's, not forcing them together, but weaving them into a single, new pattern. A true, stable union. It will be a long road. But at the end of it, you will not be a demi-servant with a time limit. You will be something new, something whole, and you will have a full, long life ahead of you. A life you can choose for yourself. The silence in the room was absolute. Mash stared at him, her violet eye wide with disbelief. The scope of what he was offering was too vast to comprehend. A life, a future, a choice. These were luxuries she had never been allowed to even dream of. The greatest hope the finest minds in Chaldea could offer her was a few more months of managed decline. This man, this stranger who fell from the sky, was offering her an entire lifetime. The tears now flowed freely, silent and overwhelming. They were not tears of sadness, but of a hope so powerful it was painful. Why? She choked out, the word thick with emotion. Why would you do that, for me? Naruto's expression was one of profound, gentle sincerity. Because a long time ago, I was also seen as a tool. A weapon to be used and discarded. And someone showed me kindness. They believed in me, not for what I was, but for who I could be. It is a debt I can never repay to them. So, I will spend the rest of my existence paying it forward. He offered her a small, genuine smile. Everyone deserves the chance to live. At that moment, something shifted deep within Mash. The heroic spirit Galahad, who had been a silent, imposing presence in her soul, resonated with Naruto's words. A feeling of profound rightness, of alignment with a will that was just and true, washed over her. A faint, white light began to emanate from her body, and the massive, cross-shaped shield she carried, normally invisible, flickered into existence for a moment, solid and real. Before fading away, it was a salute, an acknowledgement from one true knight to another. Mash wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a new resolve hardening her features. She looked at Naruto, her gaze clear and unwavering for the first time. The timid, frightened girl was gone, replaced by a knight who had just been given a banner to fight for. She slid off the bed and knelt on one knee, a gesture so ingrained in her spiritual core that it was instinct. I, Mash Kairilite, pledge my shield and my life to you, Naruto Uzumaki. You are not just my master. You are my hope. Please, allow me to serve you. Naruto looked down at the kneeling girl, and for the first time in a very, very long time, he felt the ghost of a connection to a world that was not dead. He reached down and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Stand up, Mash, he said softly. Partners don't kneel to each other. They stand side by side. When they returned to the command room, the atmosphere had changed completely. The remaining staff moved with a quiet, focused purpose. Da Vinci was directing engineers, optimizing the power flow to the rayshift chamber. Romani was coordinating medical supplies. Even Olga Marie was busy, her sharp voice now used not to assert dominance, but to efficiently organize the handful of survivors, her pride channeled into a desperate need to be useful. All activity stopped as Naruto and Mash entered. Mash no longer walked behind anyone, she walked beside Naruto, her posture straight, her expression determined. The change was palpable. Naruto walked to the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over the small group that now represented the entirety of humanity's future. Da Vinci, He began, his voice calm and authoritative. Prepare the coffins for a 2-person ray shift. Destination: Fuyuki City, Japan. Year: 2004. Prioritize stability over speed. Right away, Maestro. Da Vinci chirped, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. Destination locked. It's a chaotic singularity, but the connection is holding. We're lucky you reinforced the anchors. Romani, Naruto continued. You will be our mission controller. Monitor OU, our vitals and our connection to this timeline. You are our only lifeline. Of course, Romani said, nodding, a new seriousness in his eyes. I'll keep you both safe from this end. Director, Naruto said, turning to Olga Marie. Her expression was complex, a mix of resentment, grudging respect, and fear. Your role is the most critical. You must hold Chaldea together. You are the commander here. These people will look to you. Lead them. Quote, by giving her a vital role, by acknowledging her title, he gave her back a piece of the authority she had lost. It was a masterful political move, though it was born of simple, practical wisdom. Olga Marie simply stared at him for a long moment, then gave a stiff, jerky nod. Chaldea will stand, she said, her voice firm. Naruto nodded, satisfied. He looked at the main screen, where a swirling vortex of data represented the Fuyuki singularity. A place of fire and shadow, dominated by a corrupted Holy Grail. Mash, he said, not looking at her, but knowing she was ready. This will be your first true battle. Stay close. Follow my lead. We go in, we find the source of the distortion, and we correct it. Whatever we find there, we will face it together. Yes, Senpai, she said. The honorific slipping out naturally, feeling more right than, master, ever could. A computerized voice echoed through the command room. Unsummon program, start. Spiritron conversion, start. Ray shift starting in 3, 2, 1, all procedures clear. First order, commencing operation. Naruto's last sight was of the faces in the command room, fearful, determined, hopeful. They were the last of humanity. And he was their sage. The light enveloped him in Mash, and the world dissolved into a tunnel of rushing data. The foundation of truth and steel had been laid. Now, it was time to build upon it. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Dragon Witch's Shadow. The transition from the sterile, orderly confines of Chaldea's rayshift chamber to the heart of the Orleans singularity was a brutal assault on the senses. One moment, they were bathed in the cool, blue-white light of Spiritron conversion. The next, they stood under a sky the color of a fresh wound. It was a suffocating, angry crimson, streaked with veins of bruised purple and sickly ochre smoke that rose from a dozen different points on the horizon. Mash gasped, her body tensing as the reality of their situation hit her. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the metallic tang of shed blood, the acrid stench of old smoke, and a deeper, more primal smell of reptile and sulfur. It was hot, a punishing, unnatural heat that seemed to radiate from the very soil beneath their feet. They stood on a gentle hill overlooking a valley, a vantage point that offered a panoramic view of the desolation. The landscape of 15th century France, which should have been a vibrant tapestry of rolling green hills and verdant forests, was a scorched, dying thing. Entire swaths of woodland were blackened, skeletal fingers clawing at the blood-red sky. Fields that should have been ripe with summer wheat were charred plains of black stubble. In the distance, the stone shell of a burned-out village spewed a lazy column of smoke into the oppressive air. It was a land in the grip of a terminal illness. Senpai, Mash breathed, her one visible violet eye wide with horror. Her hand instinctively went to the invisible shield strapped to her arm. Its reassuring weight a small comfort in this hostile world. This is worse than the data suggested. Data is a shadow of the truth, Naruto said, his voice a low, calm anchor in the turbulent atmosphere. He stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, his sage's cloak fluttering gently in a hot breeze. He was not looking, he was perceiving. To his 6 paths sage mode, the entire singularity was an open book. A 3-dimensional map of energy and emotion. The data tells you a house is on fire. It doesn't let you feel the heat, or hear the screams of those trapped inside. He took a slow, deep breath. Tasting the corrupted air, the ley lines of this land are twisted, writhing like dying serpents. They've been forcibly redirected, all their energy siphoned towards a single point. He raised a hand and pointed northwest, towards a distant, jagged peak upon which sat the faint, ominous silhouette of a castle. There, that is the heart of the infection. A maelstrom of rage, hatred, and borrowed power, all swirling around a core of profound, bitter sorrow. His senses spread further, painting a more detailed picture. I can feel pockets of resistance. Frightened soldiers, a few scattered villages holding out against the tide. I can feel other presences, like ours, but different. Other servants. One shines with a false, crystalline brilliance. Another composes a melody of desperate courage. They are fighting, but they are scattered, treating the symptoms. He opened his eyes, his gaze now sharp and focused. And I can feel the disease itself. An army of lesser dragons, wyverns. Their natural instincts overridden by a command to destroy. They are being led by him. The caster, Giles de Raiz. His madness is a tangible stain on this era, a foul note in a song of despair. But he is not the source. He is merely the high priest to a new, vengeful god. This impossibly detailed, instantaneous analysis left Mash speechless. He had understood the entire strategic landscape of a corrupted country in less than a minute. Suddenly, a roar ripped through the air, sharp and close. Below them, in the valley, a small troop of about a dozen French soldiers, our armor battered and their fleur-de-lis banners torn, were being harried by a pack of 3 wyverns. The beasts were monstrous parodies of dragons, with leathery wings, serpentine necks, and jaws filled with serrated teeth. They swooped and dove, spitting gouts of fire that sent the soldiers scattering, their screams swallowed by the crackle of burning grass. Senpai, the soldiers, Mash cried out, her training kicking in. I see them, Naruto said calmly. He started down the hill at a measured pace, not a frantic run. Mash, this is your first battle. Your fear is a tool. It keeps you sharp. Do not let it become your master. What is your primary function as a shielder? Mash fell into step beside him, her mind racing to keep up. To protect, to defend my master and any allies. Correct. Your shield is a concept of absolute defense. Against a physical foe like these wyverns, it is nearly impregnable. Your objective is not to kill them, it is to create a zone of safety. When we reach them, you will deploy your shield and form a defensive perimeter around the surviving soldiers. Do not let a single flame or claw pass your guard. Focus only on that. Can you do it? His voice was a calming balm on her frayed nerves. He wasn't ordering her as a master, he was coaching her as a mentor. He had given her a clear, achievable objective, breaking the terrifying chaos of battle down into a single, manageable task. Yes, she said, her voice firm with new resolve. I can. Good, Naruto said, a flicker of approval in his eye. Leave the rest to me. They reached the valley floor just as one of the wyverns snapped a soldier up in its jaws, shaking him violently before tossing him aside like a broken doll. Panic was setting in among the Frenchmen. Now, Mash, Naruto commanded. Mash didn't hesitate. She planted her feet, channeling her will into her primary weapon. Lord Chaldea's. With a shimmer of ethereal light, the massive cross-shaped shield materialized in her hands. It felt heavier, more solid than it ever had in training, humming with a power that resonated with her very soul, a power Naruto had promised to heal. She slammed its base into the ground. Deploying Noble Phantasm, she shouted, though it was not the true release. A wave of translucent blue energy expanded from the shield, forming a wide, shimmering dome over the terrified soldiers, who stared in wide-eyed shock at the sudden appearance of the girl and her impossible weapon. A moment later, a wyvern spat a torrent of fire at the group. The flames hit the blue dome and dissipated harmlessly, splashing against it like water on stone. The soldiers cried out in amazement and relief. Mash gritted her teeth, the force of the impact vibrating up her arms, but the barrier held firm. She had done it. She had created her zone of safety. With the soldiers protected, Naruto moved. To the wyverns, he was just a man in strange black clothing who had appeared out of nowhere. The largest of the beasts, annoyed at being denied its meal, turned its attention to him, lowering its head and charging with a deafening roar, its heavy footfalls shaking the ground. Naruto stood his ground, unmoving. The wyvern was a freight train of muscle and scale, its maw opening wide to swallow him whole. Just as it was upon him, he vanished. Not in a burst of speed, but a simple, flicker-like motion. He reappeared above the creature's head, his body inverted, one hand placed gently on the thick scales of its skull. He channeled a minuscule, precise pulse of chakra. The wyvern's eyes rolled back into its head, and its massive body went limp, crashing to the ground unconscious, its charge ending just inches from Mash's barrier. The other two wyverns shrieked in fury and took to the air, circling above before diving in tandem. One from the left, one from the right, Naruto landed softly on the ground, his back to the unconscious beast. He didn't even look up. One of the black spheres hovering behind him shot forward, flattening and expanding into a razor-thin, semi-transparent black sheet no bigger than a kite. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it spinning through the air like a frisbee. It flew with impossible speed and precision, severing the right wing of the first diving wyvern. The creature screamed, its flight becoming a clumsy, uncontrolled spiral as it crashed heavily into the hillside. The BL axe sheet then banked impossibly in midair, changing direction to meet the second wyvern. This time, it didn't cut. It wrapped itself around the beast's snout, solidifying and silencing its fiery breath before it could be unleashed. The wyvern, blinded and panicked, flailed wildly and slammed into the ground. 3 wyverns, neutralized in less than 10 seconds, with no explosions, no grand displays of destructive power. And not a single drop of blood shed from the final 2. It was a terrifying display of efficient, controlled, and almost casual power. Naruto dispersed the truth-seeking orb, which returned to its place in the halo behind him. Mash lowered her barrier, her arms trembling slightly from the strain and adrenaline. The French soldiers stared, their expressions a mixture of awe, terror, and profound gratitude. Their leader, a grizzled man with a broken helm and a blood-stained bandage on his arm, slowly lowered his sword and approached. He dropped to one knee. "My lord," he stammered, his voice thick with a heavy French accent. You are a miracle. An angel sent by God to save us." Naruto looked down at the kneeling man, his expression unreadable. "Stand up," he said, his French perfect, learned in an instant by tracing the man's neural pathways. "I am no angel." The soldier, who introduced himself as Captain Bedouin, quickly provided a desperate and fragmented account of the last few weeks. It was a narrative of unrelenting horror. Jeanne d'Arc, their sainted maiden, their savior, had been resurrected. But she had returned as a monster, a witch cloaked in black, commanding dragons and demons. Her heart filled with a burning hatred for the France she had once died to protect. "She calls herself the Dragon Witch," Bedouin said, his voice grim as his men tended to their wounded, their eyes constantly darting towards Naruto and Mash as if expecting them to vanish. "She is a scourge upon the land. With her is that madman, Gilles de Rais, his caster abilities fueling her rage, summoning demons from the very pits of hell. They lead an army of servants, a black-armored swordsman of terrible power, a silent assassin who kills from the shadows, a mad berserker who revels in slaughter. They are unstoppable." He gestured vaguely to the south. "There are others, figments of light in the darkness. We have seen them. A beautiful queen who erects castles of crystal, a musician whose melodies can slay beasts, a holy man who fights with his bare hands. They fight for us, for France. But they are scattered, fighting a losing war on a dozen fronts. The witch is too strong. Her fortress at Orleans is impregnable." Naruto listened patiently, cross-referencing the captain's emotional, anecdotal account with the cold, hard data his senses were providing. Everything the man said aligned with what he already knew. "We were headed for Vaucouleurs," Bedouin explained, his expression bleak. "It is one of the last strongholds of the resistance, led by Lady Marie Antoinette. We were to deliver supplies, but we were ambushed." Mash looked at Naruto, her expression pleading. "Senpai, we should help them. We could escort them to Vaucouleurs, join forces with this Marie Antoinette." It was the logical, heroic choice, the textbook way to proceed. But Naruto's methods were not from any textbook. "Their fight is not our primary objective, Mash," he said, his gaze fixed on the distant, ominous castle. "Captain Bedouin, your queen is trying to win a war of attrition. She cannot win. The Dragon Witch holds all the power, fueled by a corrupted Holy Grail. As long as the Grail remains, her forces are infinite. She can summon 100 dragons for every one your allies slay. He turned to the captain. Take your men and find shelter. Stay off the main roads. Your fight for today is over. Survive. Baudouin looked crestfallen but nodded numbly. Who was he to argue with the man who had dispatched 3 wyverns without breaking a sweat? As the soldiers began to retreat, Mash turned to Naruto, her expression confused. But, Senpai, what is our objective, then? If not to fight her armies? You don't cure a plague by swatting the flies it attracts, Naruto said. His voice low and steady as he began walking northwest. You find the source of the sickness and you excise it. We are going to the heart of the matter. We are going to have a conversation with the Dragon Witch. Mash's eye widened. Alone. Just the 2 of us. Into her fortress. Yes. He glanced back at her, seeing the hesitation and fear in her face. He stopped. Mash, I will not order you to come with me. This path is the most direct, but it is also the most dangerous. If you believe your duty is to help those soldiers, to fight alongside the resistance, then you should do so. Your will is your own. Make your choice. He presented the choice with no judgment, no expectation. He was giving her true agency, a gift more precious than any power. Mash looked from the retreat, forms of the French soldiers to the resolute back of the man who had promised her a future. Her choice was never in doubt. She ran to catch up, falling into step beside him. My place is with you, Senpai, she said, her voice filled with unwavering conviction. My shield is yours. Naruto nodded once, a flicker of a smile on his face. Then let's go. Together, they walked towards the Dragon Witch's shadow. 2 lonely figures against a backdrop of fire and ruin. The journey to Orleans was a pilgrimage through hell. The land grew more twisted and blighted the closer they got. The trees were petrified, their bark peeling back to reveal wood the color of old bone. The rivers ran sluggish and black, choked with a foul sludge. The air grew thick with the residue of dark magic, a palpable miasma of hatred that made Mash's teeth ache. On the roadsides, skeletons of French knights were impaled on jagged spikes, their armor rusting in the oppressive heat, a silent, gruesome warning. Naruto moved through it all with a serene, untroubled grace, his senses acting as a perfect guide. They bypassed wyvern patrols, avoided demon ambushes, and slipped past the notice of sentries. He moved with a purpose that bordered on precognition, flowing like water around the rocks of Jalter's defenses. The fortress itself was a perversion of a once great castle. Its stone walls were blackened and scorched, covered in pulsating purple veins of corrupted energy. Vicious-looking gargoyles, twisted into demonic shapes, leered from the battlements. A massive, tattered black banner, emblazoned with a snarling dragon, hung from the highest tower, a declaration of ownership. They entered not through the gates, but through a collapsed section of the outer wall, slipping into the castle grounds like ghosts. The courtyard was filled with lizardmen, soldiers and hulking, demonic beasts, but Naruto guided them through the shadows, his presence suppressed to the point of near invisibility. He led them not to the dungeons or the barracks, but towards the castle's central keep, to a building that had clearly once been a grand cathedral. Its vaulted roof was collapsed in places, letting the hateful red light of the sky pour in. Its tall, arched doors hung open, beckoning them into the darkness within. She's in there, Naruto whispered, his voice a bare murmur. Alone, they stepped through the doorway and into the Dragon Witch's throne room. The space was a monument to blasphemy. The grand nave of the cathedral had been gutted. Pews were smashed and piled up like firewood. The beautiful stained glass windows, which once depicted the lives of saints, had been melted and reformed into hellish mosaics of fire, betrayal, and revenge. At the far end, where the altar should have been, sat a throne. It was a monstrous thing of twisted black metal, dragon bones, and melted church bells, a throne built from the desecrated corpse of faith itself. And upon it, sat Jeanne d'Arc altar. She was the picture of vengeful beauty. Clad in jagged black armor, her pale hair like spun moonlight against the gloom. A long, black banner emblazoned with her personal emblem rested against her throne. Her golden eyes, sharp and intelligent, were filled with a burning, nihilistic rage. She wasn't reviewing battle plans or commanding troops. She was simply sitting, brooding, stewing in her own hatred. Her gaze snapped towards them the moment they entered. A cruel, Mocking smirk spread across her lips. Well, she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm and scorn. What have we here? A little stray and her keeper. I was wondering when Chaldea's rats would scurry out of their hole. Tell me, little shield maiden, does your master have you on a tight leash? Or does he let you beg for scraps? Mash flinched at the venom in her words, raising her shield defensively. We are not here to fight you. Jalter laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the cavernous space. Oh, you are mistaken, little girl. Everyone who stands before me is here to fight. Or to burn. She rose from her throne, a river of black, cursed fire flowing from her hands, pooling around her feet. I am the dragon witch, the vengeance of France. I am the hate of the hero you all praise. Now, show me your despair. Let me hear you scream. With a gesture, she sent a massive wave of that black fire roaring towards them. It was a torrent of pure annihilation, hot enough to turn stone to slag. Naruto stepped in front of Mash. He didn't erect a barrier or prepare a counterattack. He simply raised his right hand. A single truth-seeking orb shot forward and hovered before his palm. The inferno slammed into it, and vanished. The fire, the heat, the sound, the force, all of it was simply gone. The black orb, a sphere of perfect nothingness, drank the cataclysmic spell without a ripple, negating its very existence. Jalter's smirk faltered, a flicker of confusion in her golden eyes. What? Ignoring her shock, Naruto began to walk forward, straight through the space where the inferno had been. His pace was unhurried, his expression calm. Impressive, he said, his voice even. A fire fueled by hatred, empowered by a grail. It carries the concept of burning all that is holy. A powerful curse. Enraged by his nonchalance, Jalter unleashed another volley, then another. She summoned lances of black energy, conjured shrieking phantoms, and called down pillars of flame. Each and every attack met the same fate. They simply ceased to be upon touching the small black sphere that floated before Naruto as he continued his inexorable advance. Her ultimate attacks, the spells that had routed armies and brought heroes to their knees, were being treated as a minor inconvenience. Stop that, fight me, she shrieked, her composure cracking. The raw fury now mixed with a thread of disbelief and fear. Why won't you fight me? Because a battle between us would be meaningless, Naruto said, his voice echoing slightly in the desecrated hall. He was halfway to her throne now. I am not your enemy, Jean. Do not use that name. She screamed, planting her banner into the ground. Le Grandement de la Haine. The banner unleashed a torrent of conceptual hatred, a wave of pure offensive power designed to immolate the body and soul of any righteous or holy being. It was her noble phantasm, the ultimate expression of her vengeful existence. The wave struck Naruto. He didn't even slow down. His six-path sage mode, a power born of understanding the universe, was not holy, in a way her curse could comprehend. It was simply a higher order of reality. The flames of hatred washed over him like a gentle stream, parting around his body as if he were a sacred stone in a river. He came to a stop just before her, the black orb returning to its halo. He now stood close enough to see the genuine shock on her face, the way her fists were clenched so tight her armored knuckles were white. He looked at her. Is Sage's perception cutting through the layers of rage and power? Your strength isn't yours, he said softly, but his words struck her harder than any physical blow. It's a gift from a corrupted grail. Your passion isn't yours. It's colored by the theatrical madness of Gilles de Rais, who wished for a vengeful saint and created you. Your hatred, even your hatred, isn't truly your own. It is the imagined anger of a girl who was burned at the stake, filtered through the desires of others. You are a puppet, dancing on strings you can't even see. Lies, she hissed, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. She swung her banner at him like a club. He caught the pole with one hand, his grip effortless but absolute. Look at me, he commanded, his voice firm. The Rinne Sharingan in his left eye seemed to glow with an inner light. Look at me and see the truth. He activated the technique. It was not a grand, world-breaking genjutsu. It was a subtle, intimate application of yin release, a bridge between two minds. For an infinitesimal moment, the reality of the cathedral dissolved for Jalter. She was no longer in her throne room. She was standing in the soft sunlight of a peaceful village. A place with trees and laughing children. And she saw him, a small blonde boy, no older than 5, sitting all by himself on a swing. He wasn't crying. He was just alone. She could feel the crushing weight of that loneliness. The palpable waves of hatred and fear directed at the child from the whispering villagers who passed by. Demon. Monster. Stay away from him. The words were not in French, but she understood them perfectly. She felt the child's desperate, unspoken yearning for a single kind word, a single friendly touch, a single person to acknowledge his existence beyond the monster he was forced to contain. It was a loneliness so profound, so absolute, it was a physical ache in her chest. Then, just as quickly as it came, the vision was gone. Reality snapped back into place. Jalter found herself on her knees, her banner having slipped from her nerveless fingers. She was breathing heavily, her heart pounding. The memory, though it was not hers, felt more real and raw than any of her own manufactured feelings of hatred. That feeling, that utter, soul-crushing isolation, she knew it. It was the secret feeling hidden beneath all her rage. He had reached past her fire and touched the cold, empty core within. Naruto released her banner and turned his back to her. A fire born of true conviction can change the world, he said quietly, looking at the blasphemous throne. But a fire born of loneliness just burns itself out. He began to walk away, towards the exit. Mash, who had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence, her mind reeling from the psychic backlash of the shared memory, quickly followed him. Wait, Jalter choked out, her voice raw. What was that? What did you do to me? Naruto paused at the doorway but did not turn around. I owed you that you are not as alone in your pain as you think you are, he said. A seed planted in a storm cannot grow. When you are tired of the noise, you will find your answer. And with that, they were gone, leaving her alone in the vast, silent cathedral. Jalter remained on her knees, trembling. The rage was still there, a familiar cloak. But now it felt thin, threadbare. Underneath it was a chilling confusion. And something else, an echo of a shared memory. A shared pain. She raised a hand to her face, her fingers brushing against her cheek. They came away wet, for the first time since her creation. The dragon witch was crying, and she had no idea why. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Eternal Warrior's Gaze. The return to Chaldea was a jarring, yet welcome, sensation. The chaotic, blood-soaked reality of the Orleans singularity dissolved into a swirling tunnel of blue light, and the thick, oppressive atmosphere of hatred was replaced by the clean, sterile air of the Rayshift chamber. For a moment, Mash staggered. The abrupt transition and the lingering psychic echo from Jalter's throne room leaving her dizzy. A steady hand on her shoulder grounded her. It was Naruto, his presence as calm and unshakable as a mountain. Easy, he said, his voice low. The soul needs a moment to catch up with the body. The chamber doors hissed open, revealing the entire senior staff waiting for them in the command room. Romani Archaman looked as if he hadn't slept, his eyes wide with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Olga Marie stood with her arms crossed, her posture rigid, though frantic tension in her shoulders had lessened. And Leonardo da Vinci was practically vibrating with excitement, her brilliant eyes sparkling with 1,000 questions. They're back, she chirped, clapping her hands together. Maestro, Mash, report, was the singularity resolved? Did you correct the timeline? And more importantly, did you bring me back any interesting data on that delightful drag? On Witch's unique brand of pyrothaumaturgy. Naruto stepped out of the chamber, Mash following closely behind. He gave a single, slow nod. The Grail has been retrieved. The anchor of the singularity has been removed. The timeline is self-correcting as we speak. Jalter's influence will fade, and history will gradually return to its proper course. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. They had done it. Their first mission, against all odds, was a success. Romani sagged against a console, a weary grin spreading across his face. You actually did it. You really did it. Olga Marie, for her part, could only manage a stiff nod, a silent admission of the impossible feat he had accomplished. The prideful director was slowly being eroded away by the sheer, undeniable competence of the man before her. Excellent. A rousing success for our first outing, Da Vinci declared with a flourish. She then leaned in conspiratorially, her her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I must know, how did you handle her? A strategic masterstroke, overwhelming power, a battle of philosophies that would make Plato weep with envy. All of the above, Naruto replied simply, offering no further details. The memory of that psychic exchange with Jalter felt too personal, too raw to be reduced to a mission report. It was a secret shared between him and the broken saint he had left kneeling in her desecrated church. He looked over at Mash, who was giving her own report to Romani, her voice more confident than it had ever been. She had faced true danger and had not broken. More than that, she had made her first real choice. The first seed of her new life was beginning to sprout. A faint, proud smile touched Naruto's lips. While this victory is significant, he said, his voice drawing the attention of the room once more, it has also revealed a weakness in our position. A weakness? Olga Marie questioned, her brow furrowing. We just won. We won because I am here, Naruto stated, the word's simple fact. Not arrogance. Mash performed admirably, but we are only two active combatants. The next singularity may not be so straightforward. We may face multiple high-level threats simultaneously, or be forced to separate. Relying solely on my power is a poor long-term strategy. We need more strength, more options. Da Vinci's eyes lit up, instantly grasping his point. You're talking about summoning a new servant. Oh, what a splendid idea. With our victory and the retrieval of a grail, Chaldea's own energy reserves are stabilizing. And with your chakra as a potential catalyst. Oh, the possibilities. We could summon a truly top-tier servant. Romani paled slightly. A top-tier servant. Leo, you know how volatile they can be. Their mana consumption alone is astronomical. And their personalities. A high-level caster could try to take over Chaldea, a berserker could level the place by accident. Nonsense. Roman. Da Vinci waved a dismissive hand. Fortune favors the bold. Our maestro here, she said, gesturing to Naruto, has an energy signature unlike anything in the Throne of Heroes. It's not just powerful. It's ancient, primal. It resonates with concepts of life, death, nature, and divinity all at once. If we use his presence as the focal point for the summoning, we won't just get a powerful servant. We will get one who is uniquely compatible with him. It's the perfect catalyst. Naruto considered this. Chaldea's summoning system, Fate, was a marvel of thaumaturgical engineering, but it was essentially a fishing rod cast into the sea of human history. A powerful catalyst acted as bait for a specific kind of fish. Da Vinci was proposing to use him, a being who had touched the very essence of existence, as bait. The logic was sound. A being of immense power would likely attract another of its kind. Very well, Naruto agreed. Make the preparations. A strategic advantage is worth the risk. Olga Marie opened her mouth to protest, to argue for a more conservative, predictable summoning, but she stopped herself. Naruto's logic was unassailable. He wasn't just their ultimate weapon, he was their ultimate strategist, and he had just identified their greatest vulnerability. With a sigh of frustration, she acquiesced. Do it, she clipped out. But I'm holding you responsible for the consequences, Da Vinci. But of course, my dear director. Where's the fun without a little responsibility? Da Vinci said with a wink, already bounding over to the central console to prepare the summoning chamber. An hour later, Naruto stood alone in the center of the summoning chamber. It was a circular, high-ceilinged room, the floor dominated by a massive, intricate summoning circle that glowed with a soft, ethereal light. The air hummed with contained power. In the observation room above, Mash, Olga Marie, Romani, and Da Vinci watched behind reinforced glass. All systems are nominal, Da Vinci announced over the intercom, her voice fizzing with anticipation. The Fate system is calibrated, and we're using the residual energy from your singularity excursion to power the initial sequence. Maestro, on your mark. We need you to release a steady stream of your chakra into the circle. Not a flood, just enough for the throne to get a good, strong taste of your essence. Naruto closed his eyes and took a calming breath. He reached inside himself, to the vast, silent ocean of power that was his life force. He drew upon a single, minuscule drop of it and let it flow from his body. It manifested as a visible aura, a shimmering golden fire that was intensely bright yet gentle on the eyes. It was the color of a warm sunrise, filled with the promise of life and the wisdom of ages. The golden energy flowed down into the summoning circle on the floor. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The glowing lines of the circle flared from a soft blue to a blinding, incandescent white. The humming of the room rose to a deafening roar. Alarms began to shriek in the observation room. "Whoa, the energy readings are off the charts," Romani yelled, his hands flying over his console. "The taumaturgical density is 100 times greater than a standard summoning. It's going to overload." "It's not overloading, it's resonating," Da Vinci countered, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with manic glee. "Don't you see, He throne isn't just accepting the catalyst, it's answering it in kind. It has found something it recognizes, something it fears and respects. This is magnificent." Inside the chamber, the light became a swirling vortex of rainbow colors. 3 golden rings of energy materialized and began to spin rapidly within the circle. A silhouette began to form in the center of the storm, but it was indistinct, flickering. As if multiple candidates were fighting for the chance to answer the call. Then, a new energy signature slammed into the vortex, an energy that was not from Chaldea or Naruto. It was ancient, cold, and sharp as the edge of a honed spear. It carried the scent of death, the weight of eternity, and an unshakable, regal pride. This new presence forcefully ejected all other candidates from the summoning sequence, claiming the spot for itself with absolute authority. The light coalesced, solidified. And then, as suddenly as it began, the storm ceased. The roaring sound vanished. The blinding light faded, leaving only the soft glow of the circle. Standing in the center was a woman. She was tall and statuesque, with a warrior's physique that was all lean muscle and coiled power, displayed by her skin-tight, rune-etched purple bodysuit. Her long, wine-red hair flowed down her back like a river of blood. Her face was beautiful, but it was a dangerous, predatory beauty, with sharp features and eyes the color of rubies. In her hands, she held a single, demonic-looking crimson spear that seemed to writhe with a life of its own. But it was her presence that dominated the room. She was the presence of an absolute monarch, a being who had stood at the pinnacle of power for so long that she had become one with it. It was the presence of a killer of gods and men, a warrior who had mastered every weapon, every technique, every way to end a life. She was Scathach, the queen of the land of shadows. Her ruby eyes scanned the room, dismissing the observation deck and its occupants as irrelevant. Her gaze fell upon Naruto. It was not the gaze of a servant to a master. It was the gaze of a predator that has just encountered another, equally dangerous predator in its territory. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine surprise in them. She saw not just the golden aura of his power, but the 10 black spheres that floated silently behind him. She saw the Rinne Sharingan in his left eye, an artifact of divine power that she recognized not by its history, but by its sheer weight on reality. Most of all, she saw his stillness. He was not intimidated. He was not awed. He was simply observing her, his azure eye holding the same deep, ancient calm that she herself had cultivated over millennia of immortality. "So," Scathach's voice was a low, melodic purr, yet it carried an edge of steel. "It was you. Your signal was the one that called to me. A being who stands outside the cycle, who has cheated death not with a curse, but by your own power." She took a step forward, the tip of her demonic spear. Guy Bolg alternative, scraping lightly against the floor. "I have grown weary of this world. Weary of immortality. Weary of waiting for a warrior who could finally grant me the release of a true death. I answered this summons on a whim, hoping to find a battle worthy of my time." Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "I did not expect to find a man who might actually be capable of killing me." Naruto met her intense gaze without flinching. "And I did not expect the throne to send a warrior who has already died 1,000 deaths in her heart." The air in the room crackled with tension. Scathach's smile widened. He understood. He saw past the queen, past the legend, and saw the weary immortal beneath. "Words are wind," she said, shifting into a low, predatory stance, her spear held ready. Show me the power that allows you to stand before me with such insolent calm. Show me if you are worthy of being my master, or if you are just another pretender who will break before my spear." She issued her challenge, not as a servant, but as an equal. "Fight me, Naruto Uzumaki." She's challenging him. A servant is challenging her own master right after being summoned. Romani shrieked, frantically trying to find some protocol for this situation in the Chaldea manual. This is a disaster. No, Olga Marie said, her voice a tense whisper, her eyes glued to the scene below. This is a test. It's a glorious, beautiful, magnificent test. Da Vinci corrected, her face alight with pure scientific and artistic ecstasy. A clash between two beings who have transcended the normal limits of existence. We can't possibly let them fight here. The collateral damage would vaporize half of Chaldea. I have a solution for that, Naruto's calm voice echoed from the intercom. He hadn't taken his eyes off Scathach. Da Vinci, I need you to create a space for us. A pocket dimension, a reality marble, connected to the training simulator. I need it to be empty, durable, and vast. Can you do that? Can I do that? Da Vinci laughed, her fingers already a blur across her console. Maestro, I can build you a coliseum in a bottle. I'll shunt the simulate, Or's core reality into a closed temporal loop and give you a canvas of infinite space and reinforced causality. Just try not to break the concept of up while you're in there. Scathach let out a low chuckle, a sound of genuine appreciation. A pocket dimension for our stage. You are full of surprises. Very well, I accept your terms. Transferring combatants to training simulation space, the Ashen Fields, Da Vinci announced. Good luck, you two. And please, try to leave enough data for me to analyze. A pillar of light engulfed Naruto and Scathach. The world dissolved and reformed around them. They were no longer in the confined summoning chamber. They stood in a vast, empty wasteland under a perpetually gray sky. The ground was flat, gray, cracked earth, stretching to an infinite horizon in every direction. There was no wind, no sound, no life. It was a space of pure, desolate emptiness, a perfect, sterile arena for a battle of gods. Scathach breathed in the dead air, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. This place, it reminds me of home. A fitting stage for our dance. Naruto didn't reply, he simply shifted into his own fighting stance, a fluid, balanced posture from a martial art that hadn't existed in this reality. The 9 truth-seeking orbs behind him that had remained after forming his staff detached and floated freely, humming with contained power. He was ready. Scathach made the first move. She didn't charge. She exploded. She crossed the 100 yards separating them in less than the blink of an eye, her red spear a crimson blur aimed directly at Naruto's heart. It was a thrust that had slain gods, a strike that moved faster than thought. Naruto didn't dodge. He didn't block. He simply swayed his torso to the right by a bare inch. The tip of the Gai Bolg, a weapon that bent causality to ensure it always struck its target, passed harmlessly by his chest, its own concept of hitting the heart, confused by Naruto's ability to perceive and react to the shift in fate itself. Her follow-up attack was instantaneous. She spun, transitioning the thrust into a devastating horizontal slash aimed at his neck. Naruto ducked under it, the wind from the spear's passage rustling his hair. As he came up, he threw a palm strike at her chest. It was not a physical blow, but a precise burst of pure natural energy, a frog kata strike. Scathach's eyes widened slightly. She couldn't block the invisible force, but she could react. She allowed the impact to hit her, using its momentum to launch herself backwards, flipping through the air and landing gracefully a dozen yards away. An attack that uses the energy of the world itself, she commented, her voice laced with approval. You fight not just with your body, but with your surroundings. Intriguing. From the command room. My God. Romani breathed, staring at the data feeds. Her initial thrust exceeded the speed of sound by a factor of 20. Naruto's evasive maneuver, there wasn't one. According to the biometric data, he didn't even register a spike in adrenaline. He just moved. He's not just reacting, Mash said, her voice filled with awe. She was watching the fight on the main screen, eyeing a level of combat she hadn't known was possible. He's anticipating. It's like he knows what she's going to do before she does it. Back in the Ashen Fields, Naruto didn't give her time to recover. He pushed off the ground, closing the distance instantly. This time, he was on the offensive. His movements were a blur of black and gold, a whirlwind of kicks, punches, and elbow strikes. It was pure, unadulterated taijutsu. honed over centuries of constant warfare. Each strike was aimed at a vital point, a nerve cluster, a joint. Scathach became a vortex of crimson and purple, her spear a living extension of her body. She blocked, parried, and deflected his every blow. The spear's shaft intercepted his fists, its butt end jabbed at his ribs, its razor-sharp tip danced around his throat. Their battle was a storm of precise, lethal choreography. The air cracked and hissed with the force of their blocked blows. Craters formed on the gray ground where they landed. For a full minute, they were locked in a stalemate of pure martial skill. Then, Naruto changed his tactics. As he threw a punch, one of his truth-seeking orbs shot forward, elongating into a sharp, black spear, perfectly mimicking Scathach's own weapon. He parried her next thrust with his new weapon, the sound of their clash a sharp, discordant shriek of metal on pure nothingness. Another orb morphed into a razor-sharp sword. Another, a heavy shield. Another, a flexible chain. In seconds, Naruto was no longer just a taijutsu master. He was an army of one, wielding a dozen different weapons simultaneously, each one a perfect, unbreakable construct of conceptual energy, all of them moving in perfect concert with his body. Scathach was forced back for the first time, a look of fierce, joyful concentration on her face. This was it. This was the battle she had dreamed of for 1,000 years. She spun her spear, creating a whirlwind of crimson energy that deflected the barrage of black weapons. Wisdom of the haunted ground. She roared. Ancient, glowing runes materialized in the air around her. Some shot forward as projectiles of concussive force. Others created shimmering defensive walls. One pulsed with a debilitating aura, designed to slow an opponent's movements. Naruto's Rinne Sharingan saw through it all. He absorbed the energy of the projectile runes directly, feeding his own power. He shattered he defensive walls with precise strikes from his truth-seeking weapons. The debilitating aura washed over him and had no effect. His own sage energy was a perfect counter to any form of external manipulation. Impressive, he commented, his voice calm amidst the storm of their battle. But runes are just a primitive form of programming reality. Let me show you what true creation looks like. He disengaged, leaping back 100 yards. He brought his hands together in a familiar seal. Wood style. Deep forest emergence. The gray, cracked earth of the reality marble exploded. Massive, writhing, trees and vines erupted from the ground, growing at an impossible rate. In seconds, the desolate wasteland was transformed into a dense, sprawling forest, a sea of wood that surged towards Scathach like a tidal wave. From the command room, he's creating life. In a sterile pocket dimension with no organic matter. Romani yelled, pulling at his hair. That's not possible. It violates every law of thermodynamics and thaumaturgy. He's not creating it from the dimension, Da Vinci said, her eyes wider than dinner plates. He's creating it from himself. He's converting his chakra into matter, perfectly replicating the biological structure of wood on a massive scale. The sheer creative power, it's divine. Back in the ashen fields, Scathach was not intimidated. With a battle cry, she became a crimson whirlwind, her spear carving through the massive trees as if they were paper. She vaulted off falling trunks, slid down massive roots, and danced through the wooden tsunami, her movement. A perfect blend of agility and destructive power. But Naruto was not just trying to crush her. He was shaping the battlefield. Branches shot out like spears, roots ensnared her ankles, and flowers bloomed that released clouds of soporific pollen. Scathach was forced to constantly move, to fight not just her opponent, but the entire world around her. She leapt to the top of the tallest tree, her ruby eyes scanning the forest for Naruto. She found him standing on a branch opposite her, his hands clasped together. You are a true warrior, Scathach, Naruto said, his voice carrying across the distance. You have faced every opponent, mastered every skill, but you have always fought against things. Men, gods, beasts. You have never fought against the world itself. He spread his hands. Sage art. Massive Rasengan. In his palm, a swirling sphere of blue chakra formed, growing rapidly until it was the size of a boulder, humming with the sound of 1,000 screaming winds. It was pure, concentrated rotational power. Simultaneously, he commanded the forest. Every tree, every branch, every vine turned towards Scathach, a unified army of wood preparing to crush her. Scathach looked at the army of trees closing in. Then at the massive, grinding sphere of energy hurtling towards her. A wide, ecstatic grin spread across her face. This was the pinnacle. This was the glorious end she had sought for so long. Yes, she roared, her own power flaring to its absolute peak. She held her spear aloft, and it began to glow with a terrifying, blood-red light. This is the battle I have craved. Very well, sage, let us see whose legend is stronger. She channeled all her power into her weapon. Gate of Sky. She thrust her spear not at Naruto, but at the sky. A massive, shimmering portal, a gate to her land of shadows, tore open above the forest. It radiated an immense gravitational pull, sucking in the trees, the pollen, the very air itself. Then, from the gate, a deluge of phantom spears, copies of Guy Bulb, rained down. A storm of death designed to obliterate everything below. It was a clash of two ultimate attacks, the creative power of a world-birthing forest against the nihilistic power of a death-bringing gate. Just as the two attacks were about to collide in a reality-breaking explosion, both Scathach and Naruto froze. A single, black, razor-sharp spike had erupted from the ground beneath Scathach's feet, its tip stopping a fraction of an inch from the base of her throat. And a single, crimson phantom spear, having passed through the chaos unscathed, hovered a fraction of an inch from Naruto's forehead. Their ultimate attacks, designed for widespread destruction, had served as a grand misdirection for a single, precise, killing blow. They had both had the exact same idea at the exact same time. The Rasengan dissipated into harmless particles. The gate of sky shimmered and closed. The forest of trees crumbled into dust, returning the reality marble to its original, ashen state. They stood there for a long, silent moment, frozen in their tableau of mutual destruction. Stalemate. Then, slowly, Scathach began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-throated, joyous, unrestrained laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated delight. It was the laugh of a woman who had been starving for 1,000 years and had just been presented with an infinite feast. Magnificent, she breathed, her spear dematerializing as Naruto's black spike retracted into the ground. Absolutely magnificent. To think, after all this time, to find an equal. She walked towards him, her earlier predatory aura gone, replaced by an expression of profound, deep-seated respect. She stopped before him and offered a slight, graceful bow, a gesture of a warrior acknowledging another. I withdraw my challenge. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice clear and sincere. I will not serve you as a servant serves a master. That is a relationship for lesser beings. She looked him in the eye, her ruby gaze burning with a new fire, not of battle, but of purpose. I will serve you as a partner, as a comrade in arms. Your battles will be my battles. Your path will be my path. To stand by the side of a warrior such as you, that is a purpose far greater than seeking a meaningless death. Naruto looked at the queen of the land of shadows, this immortal warrior who had finally found something to live for. He saw the fire in her eyes, the respect in her posture, and the powerful bond that had just been forged between them in the crucible of their divine battle. He gave a small, accepting nod. I would be honored to have you by my side, Scathach. In the command room, the silence was absolute. Romani had fainted. Olga Marie was holding onto a console for support, her face ashen. Mash was simply staring, her heart filled with a terrifying, thrilling awe. Da Vinci, however, was weeping silent tears of pure joy, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. Such beauty, she whispered to herself, watching the two figures on the screen. Such power, such perfect, terrifying symmetry. This is true art. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Tea and Treason in the Clock Tower. The successful summoning of Scathach and the resolution of the Orleans singularity sent a ripple through the fabric of spacetime, a ripple that did not go unnoticed. While the mundane world remained blissfully unaware, the hidden corners of the Magus world, those ancient organizations that monitored the flow of thaumaturgical energy, registered the event as a seismic shock. To them, it was as if a dormant volcano had suddenly erupted in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, spewing forth an energy signature that was both terrifyingly powerful and utterly alien. Chaldea, once a semi-independent research outpost operating on the fringes of the Mages Association's influence, had suddenly become the single most important, and most dangerous, variable on the planet. The message arrived not through any conventional means, but as a formal summons etched in glowing runes that materialized in the air of the command room. It was addressed to the acting director of Chaldea, and bore the official seal of the Clock Tower, the ancient labyrinthine heart of the Mages Association in London. The tone was imperious, couched in the language of polite inquiry but carrying the unyielding weight of a royal command. They requested, or rather, demanded, a formal briefing. They wanted to know how Chaldea had survived, how it was still operational, and, most importantly, who was now in control. It was inevitable, Olga Marie said, her voice tight with anxiety as she stared at the fading runes. Her hands were clenched at her sides. For her, the Clock Tower was the boogeyman of her childhood, the institution her father had defied. The viper's nest of political intrigue and ancient rivalries that she had been raised to both respect and fear. They see a power vacuum, a resource to be claimed. They won't see us as saviors of humanity. They'll see us as rogue elements who have stumbled upon a power they can't control. Romani paced nervously behind her. She's right. The great mage families, they're like sharks. They smell blood in the water. They'll send a delegation, and their idea of a briefing will be a hostile takeover disguised with pleasantries. They'll try to seize control of the rayshift technology, confiscate your servants, and probably dissect Naruto to figure out what he is. Let them try, a low, dangerous voice purred from the corner of the room. Scathach was leaning against a wall, her arms crossed. Her crimson spear dematerialized but its presence still palpable. Since her summoning, she had become a silent, watchful guardian, her ruby eyes missing nothing. Her gaze flickered to Naruto. Say the word, and their delegation will never arrive. Naruto, who had been listening to the exchange with his customary calm, shook his head. Assassination is a tool of fear, not of stability. We are trying to protect humanity, not rule it through intimidation. A war with the Mages Association would be a distraction we cannot afford. He looked at Olga Marie, his expression serious. They will not be reasoned with through logic or appeals to the greater good. They understand only two things, lineage and power. Your lineage, he nodded to her, gives us a foothold, a reason for them to speak with us instead of simply trying to obliterate us. My power, his gaze became hard as diamond, is what will ensure they listen. He turned to Da Vinci. Leo, this meeting cannot happen in Chaldea. It would be a catastrophic security risk. Can you create a neutral ground? A pocket dimension, secure and isolated, linked only to us in a single point of entry that we can offer them. Da Vinci's eyes gleamed. A magical off-site conference room. Maestro, you wound me with the simplicity of the request. I shall construct a veritable Versailles of pocket dimensions. It will be elegant, imposing, and so heavily warded that not even a stray thought could leak in or out without my permission. Good, Naruto said. He then turned his attention to the rest of his small, makeshift council. This will be a battle of wills and words, not fists. Olga Marie, I will need you to brief me on the key players, the politics, the customs of the Clock Tower. I will not walk into the IR den without knowing the scent of every wolf. His gaze shifted to Mash, who stood ready, her shield a constant, comforting presence. Mash, you will be by my side. Your role is to be a silent testament to Chaldea's strength. He then looked at Scathach. Queen of the Land of Shadows, your reputation precedes you even in this world. Your presence alone will be a powerful deterrent. Finally, he looked towards the shadows in the room, where a figure had been lurking, observing everything with cynical, golden eyes. Jalter, Jean Alter, who had been summoned back to Chaldea after the timeline correction and had remained a sullen, begrudgingly cooperative presence ever since, pushed herself off the wall. What do you want? She grumbled, her arms crossed. I want your advice, Naruto said simply. Jalter blinked, taken aback. My advice? Why in God's name would you want my advice? Because, Naruto said, his voice dropping slightly, you were born from a twisted wish. You were an expert in hatred, deception, and the art of seeing the worst in people. These mages, they are driven by pride, greed, and a lust for power. You understand those motivations better than anyone here. I want you to listen to our plan and tell me where it will fail. I want you to be our devil's advocate. A slow, cruel smile spread across Jalter's face. For the first time since coming to Chaldea, she looked truly alive. So, you want me to teach you how to be a manipulative bastard? She purred, her golden eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Oh, this might actually be fun. The meeting space NCI created was a masterpiece of thaumaturgical architecture. It was a circular chamber with a high, domed ceiling that showed a slow-moving starscape. The walls were made of a polished, obsidian-like material that seemed to absorb all sound, creating an atmosphere of intense, focused silence. In the center of the room was a single, large, circular table made of petrified wood, polished to a mirror shine. There were no chairs. The unspoken rule was clear. This was a meeting of powers, not a comfortable chat. Naruto stood on one side of the table, flanked by Mash in her full battle attire and Scathach in her regal, intimidating bodysuit. Olga Marie stood slightly behind him, her face pale but resolute. They were a tableau of quiet, unassailable strength. A shimmer in the air on the opposite side of the room announced the arrival of the delegation. 3 figures stepped through a shimmering portal that closed silently behind them. The man in the center was clearly the leader. He was an older man, tall and thin, with sharp, aristocratic features and silver hair tied back in a neat tail. He wore immaculate, deep blue robes embroidered with the crest of a noble mage family, the House of El Meloy. This was Lord Marston El Meloy, a man known in the Clock Tower for his razor-sharp intellect, his vast political influence, and his utter ruthlessness. To his right stood a woman clad in the practical, militaristic uniform of the association's enforcers. She was stern-faced, with a scar running down her cheek, and her hand never strayed far from the hilt of the complex magical blade at her hip. She was his bodyguard, a physical threat to match his political one. To his left stood a younger man, a specialist in magical analysis, his eyes darting around the room, trying to deconstruct Da Vinci's warding scheme. His expression a mixture of awe and frustration. Lord Marston's gaze swept over the Chaldean contingent, his eyes lingering for a moment on Scathach with a flicker of recognition and caution, before finally settling on Naruto. There was no warmth in his eyes, only the cold, calculating appraisal of a jeweler examining a strange new gem to determine its worth and how best to cut it. Director Animosphere, he began, his voice smooth and cultured, completely ignoring Naruto for the moment. It is a relief to see you have survived the unfortunate incident. The Clock Tower extends its deepest condolences for the loss of your father and your staff. The words were polite, but they dripped with condescension. Lord Marston, Olga Marie replied, her voice steady, following the script Naruto had laid out. Chaldea appreciates your concern. As you can see, we are still operational. Indeed, Marston said, his gaze finally shifting to Naruto. And it would seem you have acquired new personnel. Unregistered personnel, I might add. Of a rather exotic nature. He gestured vaguely at Naruto. You will identify yourself. It was the same demand Olga Marie had made. But this time it was backed by the weight of a global institution. This was the moment Jalter had warned him about. They'll try to frame you, to put you in a box they understand, she had sneered during their preparation. Don't let them. Don't define yourself by their rules. Make them play by yours. Naruto did not answer immediately. He simply met the Lord's gaze, his azure eye calm and unblinking. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. In the Clock Tower, such a deliberate pause was an act of profound disrespect. Lord Marston's eye twitched almost imperceptibly. Finally, Naruto spoke. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I am the acting commander of Chaldea's combat operations. He did not give a title they could categorize. He created a new one. Acting commander. Marston scoffed lightly. A title of your own invention. I presume. By what authority do you hold this position? By the authority of results, Naruto replied, his voice still even. While the Mages Association was debating what to do, I resolved the Fuyuki Singularity in 2004. While your information gatherers were still trying to understand the nature of the crisis in France, I resolved the Orleans Singularity. I hold this position because I am the only one capable of doing so. The blunt, unadorned truth of his statement was like a physical slap. He was not boasting. He was stating a fact, and in doing so, he was highlighting their own inaction. The Lord's face tightened. A bold claim from an unknown. You speak of resolving singularities, yet you have provided no proof, no data, no evidence to the association. For all we know, you could be the cause of these crises, a foreign element seeking to destabilize our reality. Accuse, 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 Jalter's voice echoed in Naruto's memory. They'll try to put you on the defensive. Throw it back in their faces. Naruto gave a small, almost dismissive shake of his head. Proof is a luxury we no longer have time for. You say I have provided no data. That is because your organization is a leaky sieve of political infighting and competing interests. To give you the data on the singularities would be to give a map of our future battles to a dozen different factions, some of whom would undoubtedly try to weaponize the information for their own gain. The security of humanity takes precedence over the political sensibilities of the clock tower. He had just called the most powerful magical organization on Earth incompetent and untrustworthy to its face. The enforcer tensed, her hand tightening on her sword. The young analyst looked horrified. Lord Marston's face, however, became a mask of cold fury. You are playing a dangerous game, boy, he hissed, the pleasantries stripped away. You stand here, an anomaly of unknown origin, with a legendary servant of immense power at your side, in control of one of the most powerful taumaturgical devices ever created. You speak of protecting humanity, but all I see is a rogue agent hoarding power. The clock tower will not stand for it. We will have control of Chaldea. No, Naruto said, the single word spoken with absolute finality. You will not. And what makes you think you can stop us? Marston sneered. Do you think your single servant can stand against the full might of the Mages Association? We have hundreds of magi, dozens of high-level servants at our command when necessary. We can lay siege to Chaldea for 1,000 years. Naruto finally smiled. It was a cold, thin smile that did not reach his eyes. You still don't understand, do you? You are thinking in terms of armies and sieges. I am not a general. I am a force of nature. He raised his left hand. The Rinne Sharingan, which had been dormant, flared to life, its concentric rings and red tomo pulsing with a divine, terrifying light. He did not unleash a wave of power. He did something far more subtle, and far more terrifying. He targeted the Lord's magic crest. A magic crest was the pride and history of a mage family. A complex organ woven from generations of taumaturgical knowledge and transplanted from parent to child. It was the source of their power, their identity. Lord Marston suddenly gasped, his eyes going wide with shock and pain. He clutched at his chest, a look of utter disbelief on his face. He could feel it. A foreign power, impossibly precise and unimaginably vast, had bypassed all his personal wards, all his defenses, and had wrapped itself around his very soul, around the intricate, priceless magic crest that defined his lineage. He could feel that power gently, squeezing. Naruto hadn't damaged it. He had simply shown the Lord that he could obliterate his family's entire history, his entire legacy, with a single thought. It was the magical equivalent of holding a nuclear warhead to a man's head and asking him to reconsider his position. You speak of lineage, Naruto said, his voice now laced with an icy chill. I can erase your lineage from existence. You speak of power. I can turn your power off like a light switch. You speak of armies. I resolved a singularity by facing down an army of dragons alone. You are threatening me with sticks and stones, Lord Marston, while I am holding the sun in my hand. He released his hold on the magic crest. The Lord staggered back, breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. The look in his eyes was no longer one of arrogance or anger. It was one of pure, primal fear. He was looking at a being whose power operated on a level he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Naruto let the silence hang in the air for a moment before continuing, his tone returning to one of calm reason. Chaldea will remain autonomous. It must. We are humanity's only defense against the incineration. But we are not your enemies. We will offer you a compromise. He gestured to Olga Marie. Director Animosphere will provide you with regular, heavily redacted reports on our progress. Enough to assure you that we are working towards the restoration of the timeline. But not enough to compromise our operational security. In return, the Mages Association will use its considerable resources to cover for us. It will handle the mundane world, the UN, the political fallout. It will maintain the illusion that everything is normal, while we do the impossible work of making that illusion a reality. He laid out the terms not as a negotiation, but as a statement of fact. He had broken them with his power, and now he was offering them a way to save face, a role to play that was both vital and kept them at a safe distance. Lord Marston, his face pale and his composure shattered, looked at Naruto, then at the implacable Queen of Shadows, then at the resolute Shield Maiden, and finally at the terrified but determined Director Animosphere. He saw a unified front, backed by a power beyond his understanding. He had come here expecting to intimidate a grieving, disorganized girl into submission. He had found a king, defended by a god-killer, and supported by a unified court. Slowly, painfully, he gave a single, jerky nod. Your terms are acceptable, he managed to say, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. For now, I am glad we could come to an understanding, Naruto said smoothly, the coldness vanishing from his voice. He had won. He had faced the full political might of the clock tower and had not bent, had not broken, had not compromised. He had established a new paradigm, not with fire and fury, but with a chilling demonstration of absolute power and a masterful application of political strategy. He had protected Chaldea's autonomy and secured their future. As the shaken delegation departed through their portal, Olga Marie finally let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She looked at Naruto with a new expression, one that held no resentment or pride. It was an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. How did you know? She whispered. How did you know exactly what to do, what to say? Naruto turned, a genuine, warm smile finally reaching his eyes. His gaze flickered towards the empty corner where Jalter had stood in his mind's eye. I had good advice, he said. Never underestimate the tactical value of a vengeful saint. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Lion Queen at the World's End. The transition to the sixth singularity was profoundly different from the last. There was no jarring leap into a world of fire and chaos. Instead, it was a slow, bleaching fade into oppressive, absolute light. When reality resolved around them, the team stood not in a land of ruin, but in a place of terrible, sterile perfection. They were in a vast desert of pale, almost white sand that stretched to a horizon blurred by heat haze. Above them, a brilliant, featureless white sun hung directly at the zenith, unmoving. There was no dawn, no dusk, only an eternal, punishing noon. The air was unnaturally still, hot, and dry, carrying no scent but that of baked sand and stone. There was no wind, no birdsong, no sign of insect life. The silence was as absolute and oppressive as the light. What is this place? Mash whispered, her voice sounding small and intrusive in the profound stillness. She raised her shield, not against an immediate threat, but as if to ward off the sheer alien nature of the environment. Scathach's ruby eyes scanned the horizon, her warrior's senses on high alert. This is a cursed land, she stated, her voice a low hum. But the curse is not one of destruction. It is a curse of purity, of stagnation. It feels like the world is holding its breath. A disgusted snort came from their fourth companion, Jalter, who had been grudgingly coerced into joining the mission under the guise of providing tactical analysis on villainous monologuing, kicked at the white sand with her armored boot. Call it what it is. It's a bore. A world without shadows is a world without character. I hate it already. Naruto said nothing, his eyes closed. His sage mode was drinking in the sensory data of this new reality. And what it told him was deeply unsettling. Unlike Orleans, which had felt like a festering wound, this place felt like a body that had been embalmed. The ley lines weren't twisted. They were locked in a rigid, perfect pattern. The natural energy of the world was suppressed, suffocated under a blanket of immense, controlled, and utterly cold divine power. The sun is not a star, he said finally. His voice grave. It's a construct, a lens of magical energy, fixed in place to pour down a constant stream of power. The desert itself is unnatural. The sand is not silicon, it's pulverized bone and stone. This entire land was scoured clean, then meticulously arranged. He pointed towards the far horizon, where a faint, shimmering needle pierced the sky. And the source of it all is there. A holy city, and within it, a king. Before they could ponder his words further, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He gestured for the others to take cover behind a rare outcropping of sun-bleached rock. A short distance away, a small, Desperate group of figures clad in dark robes and strange, skull-like masks were scurrying across the sand, pursued by a figure of brilliant, shining steel. It was a knight. He rode a powerful warhorse, and his silver armor shone so brightly under the unmoving sun that it was painful to look at. He carried a massive greatsword and a shield emblazoned with a regal crest. Even from a distance, his power was immense, a radiant aura of chivalry and absolute conviction. "A knight of the Round Table," Scathach murmured, her eyes narrowed with professional interest. "Gawain, by the look of his solar aura." The knight easily caught up to the fleeing figures, his voice booming across the desert, carrying a tone not of malice, but of sorrowful duty. "Cease your struggle, heathens. The Lion King's judgment is absolute. You were not chosen. Accept your end with dignity." One of the robed figures, clearly the leader, turned to face him. "We will not bow to your false king, Knight of the Sun. We are the guardians of the shadows, the seekers of the true twilight. We are the Hassan." The knight, Gawain, sighed. "So be it." He raised his greatsword, and it ignited with a sheath of brilliant, fiery light, a miniature sun in his hands. He was about to bring it down upon the small band of assassins when Naruto intervened. He didn't attack, he simply appeared between the two groups, a silent, sudden manifestation of black and gold. "That is far enough, Knight of the Round Table," Naruto said calmly. Gawain halted his strike, his eyes widening in surprise behind his helm. He looked at Naruto, then at the three women who had emerged from behind the rocks. "More strays. From where do you hail, strange warrior? I do not recognize your colors." "We are travelers," Naruto replied, "and we have questions for your Lion King." "The king does not grant audiences to the unchosen," Gawain said, his stance unwavering. "Lay down your arms and submit to judgment. It is the only mercy I can offer." Naruto shook his head. "We are not here to seek mercy. We are here to seek understanding." He turned his back on Gawain, a gesture of supreme confidence, and addressed the leader of the assassins. "You are the Hassan of the Cursed Arm, are you not? We mean you no harm. We are enemies of the one who rules this land." The Hassan, A.M., and whose right arm was a grotesquely long, bandaged thing, was taken aback by this stranger's knowledge. He and his followers exchanged wary glances. Gawain, enraged by the insolence of being ignored, let out a roar and charged. "Then you have chosen death." His sun-charged blade swung down with the force to cleave a mountain. But it never landed. A crimson spear intercepted it, wielded by a red-haired woman who had appeared before Naruto in a blur. Scathach met Gawain's blow head-on, her expression one of fierce concentration. The clash of sun-forged steel against demonic, cursed spear sent a shockwave blasting across the desert, kicking up a storm of white sand. Scathach was pushed back a single step, her feet digging trenches in the ground. "He is strong," she gritted out, a smile of savage joy on her lips. "The rumors of the Sun Knight are true. Under this light, his power is nearly infinite." "Then we shall give him shade," Naruto said. He formed a series of complex hand seals, his chakra flaring. Water style. Great exploding water colliding wave. An immense volume of water materialized from nothing, a veritable ocean that crashed down upon the desert floor. The sheer scale of the jutsu was staggering, instantly creating a shallow, temporary sea that stretched for miles. The sudden deluge shocked Gawain and the Hassans alike. But Naruto wasn't finished. He formed another seal, wind style. Great breakthrough. Quote, he unleashed a powerful gust of wind that swept over the surface of the new lake, atomizing the water and sending a colossal plume of mist and vapor rocketing into the sky. It spread out, thick and dense, forming a massive, miles-wide bank of artificial cloud that blotted out the hated, unmoving sun. The effect was instantaneous. The oppressive, brilliant light was replaced by a cool, gray twilight, and Gawain, the Knight of the Sun, staggered as if struck by a physical blow. The fiery aura around his sword flickered and died. The immense power radiating from his body dwindled to a fraction of its former glory. What is this sorcery?" he gasped, looking up at the artificial clouds in disbelief. "The sun, it is gone. Your strength is borrowed," Naruto said, appearing before him. "And I have cut you off from your source." Before the depowered knight could react, Naruto struck. It was a simple, open palm strike to the chest. Gawain raised his shield to block. But the blow carried an invisible force that bypassed the steel entirely, striking his body with the force of a battering ram. The knight flew backwards, his armor groaning under the impact, and crashed into the sand. Unconscious. Silence descended once more. The Hassans stared, their hidden mouths agape. They had just witnessed this stranger create an ocean from thin air, blot out the sky, and defeat the invincible Knight of the Sun with a single, seemingly simple blow. The Hassan of the cursed arm slowly approached, his wariness now replaced by a deep, profound awe. Who are you? Naruto looked at the gray twilight he had created, then towards the distant, shining city. We are the storm that has come to this land of unending noon, he said. And we are here to speak with your king. Under the protection of Naruto's artificial twilight, the team accompanied the Hassans back to their hidden village, a network of caves carved into the base of a great mountain range that bordered the desert. It was a place of shadows and secrets, a stark contrast to the bleached white world outside. There, Cursed Arm and his fellow assassins told their story. They spoke of the sudden appearance of the holy city and the arrival of a king from a foreign land, a so-called Crusader king, who had attempted to conquer the region before being utterly annihilated by the true ruler of this singularity, the Lion King. She is a goddess, Cursed Arm said, his voice a low rasp. She descended with her knights of the Round Table and passed a terrible judgment. Only the pure of soul, the virtuous, were deemed worthy of her salvation. They were brought into the holy city to live in a world without want or suffering. The rest of us, those she deemed flawed, sinful, or unnecessary, were cast out into this desert to perish. Salvation through genocide, Jalter scoffed from her corner, polishing a black vambrace. Sounds like something I would have come up with. I'm starting to like this woman. It is not an act of malice, a new voice corrected. It belonged to another figure who emerged from the shadows of the cave, a man whose face was hidden by a deep hood, but whose voice was filled with a weary wisdom. It was Hassan of the Serenity. The Lion King truly believes she is saving humanity. She is a being of absolute reason, detached from all emotion. Her actions are logical, and that is what makes her so terrifying. Naruto listened, his expression thoughtful. A king who has traded her heart for a sense of divine purpose. I have met her kind before. He looked at Cursed Arm. We intend to confront this Lion King. But her city is a fortress, and her knights are its guardians. We have dealt with Gawain, but others remain. Cursed Arm nodded. Mordred, the Knight of Treachery, patrols the eastern plains, a knight of endless fury. Then there is Treason, the sorrowful archer, whose arrows never miss. He guards the mountain passes. And within the sea, itself, there is Agravain of the Iron Will, the king's ruthless administrator. They are all formidable. Then we will dismantle her fortress one stone at a time, Scathach said, her voice filled with eager anticipation. A series of duels against legendary knights. This promises to be excellent sport. The plan was simple, and brutally effective. They would not assault the city. They would draw out its defenders and eliminate them, forcing the Lion King's hand. Over the next several days, they became ghosts of the desert, phantoms of the twilight. They found Treason in a narrow canyon pass, a sorrowful figure sitting upon a cliff, playing a mournful tune on his harp-like bow. When he attacked, his arrows were impossible things, reversing cause and effect, striking their targets before they were even fired. Mash's shield could block the impact, but not the concept of being hit. But Naruto's Rinne Sharingan could see the strings of fate being twisted. He moved not to where the arrow was, but to where its effect was destined to land, appearing there an instant beforehand to deflect the projectile with a kunai, shattering the paradox and leaving Treason in stunned disbelief. They encountered Mordred on the plains, a whirlwind of silver and red fury. She fought with a berserker's rage, her every blow filled with a desperate need for her father's approval. Naruto did not meet her rage with his own power. He flowed around her, a phantom of evasiveness, using subtle genjutsu not to harm her, but to whisper doubts into her soul. He showed her images of Artoria's cold, impassive face, a face of disappointment. Her furious assault faltered, her wild swings becoming hesitant. In that moment of doubt, Scathach struck, her spear a crimson blur that disarmed the Knight of Trey. Akari and left her kneeling in the sand, defeated not by force, but by her own insecurities. With her primary knights defeated and her patrols shattered, the holy city was isolated. The path was now clear. "It is time," Naruto said, standing on a ridge overlooking the shining city. His artificial clouds had long since dissipated, and the unmoving sun once again beat down upon the land. "I will go alone. This is not a battle to be won with an army. It is an argument to be made to a king." Jalter rolled her eyes. "You're going to try and talk her down. She's a tyrant with a god complex. You show. Old just let me burn her city to the ground. You would only prove her point," Naruto said softly. "That humanity is inherently destructive." He turned to the others. "Scathach, Mash, guard the village. Protect the refugees. This is a burden I must carry myself." Without another word, he vanished, a golden flicker against the white sand, heading directly for the gates of the Lion King. The holy city of Camelot was a place of unnerving beauty. The walls were made of pristine white stone, the streets were clean and orderly, and the air was filled with the soft, ethereal sound of a heavenly choir. The chosen people who walked the streets wore simple white robes, their faces serene and empty, devoid of strong emotion. It was a city without laughter, without tears, without art, without passion. It was a perfect, beautiful prison. Naruto walked through the streets unhindered. The guards, knights in shining armor, simply watched him pass, their expressions as placid as the citizens. They were waiting for him. He was led to the central citadel, into a vast, silent throne room. The hall was stark and minimalist, all white stone and ethereal light. On a simple, unadorned throne at the far end of the hall sat the Lion King. She was divine. Her form was that of Artoria Pendragon, but she was taller, more mature, her body encased in magnificent silver and blue armor. Her expression was one of serene, cosmic detachment, her emerald eyes holding the cold light of a distant star. In her lap rested the holy spear, Rongomyniad, which pulsed with a power so immense it seemed to pin the very reality of the room in place. She was not a king. She was a goddess. "You have come," she said, her voice a perfect, melodic chime, devoid of any inflection. "The anomaly who defeated my knights and shrouded my son. I have been watching you. And I have been watching you, Lion King," Naruto replied, his voice echoing in the silent hall. He stopped a respectful distance from her throne. "Haven't you seen the peace and salvation I have brought to this world?" she stated. "I have culled the weak, the sinful, the foolish. I have preserved the worthy souls in a perfect city, safe from the pain and folly of human choice. I am saving humanity from its own self-destructive nature. Why do you oppose this perfect salvation?" Naruto listened to her cold, rational logic. He saw no malice in her, only a profound, misguided sense of duty. "Because what you have created is not salvation," he said softly. "It is a museum, a beautiful, sterile exhibit of what humanity once was." He took a step closer. "I come from a world that achieved a perfect, lasting peace. There were no more wars, no more famines, no more great struggles to overcome. And do you know what happened to that world?" The Lion King remained silent, her gaze fixed on him. "It died," Naruto said, his voice filled with an ancient sorrow. "It faded away into dust and silence. Because struggle, choice, the potential for failure, that is what gives life its meaning. The artist who struggles to perfect their craft, the farmer who battles the drought, the lover who risks heartbreak for a moment of joy. That is the fire of humanity. You have not preserved that fire. You have extinguished it and saved only the ashes." For the first time, a flicker of something, not emotion, but intellectual curiosity, entered the goddess's eyes. Quote, "You speak with the weight of one who has seen the end. Your existence is a paradox." "My existence is a warning," Naruto corrected. "Your spear, Rongomyniad, it is a divine anchor, a pillar designed to fasten the layers of the world together. A tool of preservation. But you are using it to nail the lid on a coffin." He met her divine gaze with his own, his azure eye holding the wisdom of ages. Hi. S. Rinne Sharingan seeing the immense burden she carried. "I too was a pillar for my world. I carried the weight of the 10 tails, a power that could create or destroy worlds. I understand the loneliness of your position. The terrible clarity that comes with seeing the world from the heights of divinity. I understand the temptation to simply fix it." His words struck a chord deep within the goddess. He was not challenging her power. He was empathizing with her burden. He was speaking her language, the language of cosmic responsibility. For the first time since she had become this divine being, someone was looking at her and seeing not a monster or a savior, but an equal. "Your logic is flawed, Lion King," Naruto said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Your knights, who you believed invincible, have been defeated. Your perfect city is built on a foundation of despair. You believe you have created a paradise, but you have only created a beautiful cage." He turned to leave. "I will not fight you today. Because my argument is not yet complete. I will show you the strength of the flawed, imperfect humanity you have cast out. I will show you that their potential to choose, to struggle, and to rise is a greater power than your perfect stagnation. And then, you will be the one to make a choice." He walked away, leaving the Lion King alone on her throne. He left her in her perfect, silent city, with the echo of his words and the seed of a terrible, profound doubt. The serene, divine mask of the goddess remained in place, but behind her cold, emerald eyes, for the first time in a very long time, the human heart of King Arthur began to stir with turmoil. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Interlude. A Hearth in the Void. There was a quiet rhythm to life in Chaldea during the brief, precious intervals between singularities. It was a rhythm of repair, research, and recuperation. The hum of the life support systems was a constant reminder of their isolation, a steady heartbeat for the last bastion of humanity. For the 100 or so surviving staff members, it was a time of tireless work, poring over the data Naruto and MASH brought back, preparing for the next inevitable crisis. But for the servants, and for Naruto himself, it was something else entirely. It was a time to simply be. For beings defined by eternal conflict, these moments of peace were a foreign, almost unnerving luxury. It was in this quiet that the true foundations of their strange, new family were being laid, not in the crucible of battle, but in the small, shared moments that made up a life. It began, as so many fundamental things do, with the simple act of preparing a meal. One evening, a scent began to drift from the main cafeteria, a place that usually smelled of little more than nutrient paste and recycled air. It was a complex, layered aroma, the rich, savory scent of slow-simmered pork broth, the sharp tang of garlic and ginger, the deep, earthy notes of shiitake mushrooms, and the fresh, clean fragrance of chopped scallions. It was a smell that spoke of home, of patience, of a genuine hearth. The source, to the astonishment of the few staff members who wandered in, was Naruto. He had commandeered the entire industrial-sized kitchen, his movements a blur of practiced efficiency. He wore a simple apron over his usual black clothes, a faint dusting of flour on his cheek. One of his truth-seeking orbs had flattened itself into a perfect, impossibly sharp cutting board, while another had morphed into a whisk that was stirring a pot of noodles with inhuman speed and precision. He moved with the same focused calm he displayed in battle, but here, his intent was not to dismantle, but to create. MASH was the first to arrive, drawn by the scent. She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Senpai, what are you doing?" "I'm cooking," he replied, not looking up from the pot he was tending. "It has been a long time since I've had a proper bowl of ramen. I figured everyone else might be tired of nutrient paste, too." Soon, others were drawn by the magnetic pull of the aroma. Da Vinci floated in, sniffing the air with an appreciative, scientific curiosity. "Oh, my, the Maillard reaction in progress. The volatilization of aromatic esters. Maestro, this isn't just cooking, it's edible chemistry. A multi-sensory artistic performance." Scathach appeared next, a silent shadow in the doorway. She observed the process. Her ruby eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in analysis. She saw the vitality in the fresh ingredients, the life energy being carefully preserved and combined. To her, this was a form of potion making, a concoction to bolster the strength of her allies. The last to arrive was Jalter. She stormed in, her expression a thunderous scowl. "What is that infernal smell? It's distracting. It's disgustingly wholesome." But despite her complaints, she didn't leave. She leaned against a far wall, her arms crossed, watching the proceedings with a cynical, yet undeniably curious, gaze. When the food was ready, Naruto presented it not on standard-issue Chaldean trays, but in large, steaming ceramic bowls he had fashioned and baked himself from clay substitutes found in Da Vinci's workshop. The ramen was a work of art. A rich, cloudy tonkatsu broth, perfectly wavy noodles, thick slices of chashu pork, a marinated soft-boiled egg, and a vibrant scattering of greens. They gathered around the largest table in the cafeteria, this strange and powerful assembly of humans, servants, and a sage. For a moment, they ate in silence, the only sound the appreciative slurping of noodles. "This is the most delicious thing I have ever tasted," Mash said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of pure, simple joy. "The composition of the broth is exquisite," Da Vinci declared between bites. "The emulsification of fats creates a mouthfeel that is both rich and surprisingly light." A culinary paradox. Scathach ate with a focused, efficient intensity, but a rare look of contentment was on her face. "There is strong life in this food," she stated. "It invigorates the body." Jalter poked at a piece of pork with her chopsticks, her scowl firmly in place. "It's fine," she grumbled. Huff, she was already on her second helping. "I suppose if one is forced to eat peasant food, this is tolerable." Naruto smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression that softened the ancient wisdom in his eyes. He watched them eat, a pang of sweet, sorrowful nostalgia washing over him. It was a ghost of 1,000 other meals, at a small noodle stand in a village of green leaves. He told them a story then, not of his battles or his immense power, but of his academy days, of a foolish contest with his teammates to see who could eat the most bowls of ramen, a story that ended with his wallet empty and his stomach aching. It was a simple, human story, and in the telling of it, surrounded by these legendary, broken, and beautiful women, in the heart of the last outpost of a dead world, Naruto felt the first tentative warmth of a new home. A hearth lit in the endless void. Late that night, long after the lingering scent of ramen had faded from the cafeteria, Naruto found Mash in Chaldea's library. The place was vast and silent, a repository of all the knowledge humanity had managed to save. She had fallen asleep at a large oak table, her head pillowed on a thick, open book about world geography. Several other books on history, art, and culture were stacked neatly beside her. He stood there for a moment, simply watching her. He saw not the indomitable shielder who could withstand the fury of a noble phantasm, but a young woman, exhausted and vulnerable, dreaming of a world she had only ever seen in pictures. He gently touched her shoulder. She stirred, blinking awake, a faint blush rising on her cheeks as she realized she had dozed off. "Senpai, I'm so sorry, I was just studying the world you're saving," he finished for her, his voice soft. He pulled up a chair and sat opposite her, his gaze falling on the open page, which showed a picture of the vibrant blue oceans of the Caribbean. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Mash nodded, her gaze turning wistful. "I've only ever seen the ocean on a monitor. I wonder if the water is really that blue. I wonder what the warm sun feels like, or the sand." She looked down at her hands. "You promised me a future, senpai. A whole lifetime. And I'm so grateful, but I don't even know what to do with one. I've never thought past my next mission, my next medical scan." Naruto listened, his expression gentle. He understood her fear, the terror of an open door to a prisoner who has only ever known a cage. "What do you want to do, Mash?" he asked, the question simple but profound. "When this is all over, when the world is safe, what is the first thing you want to do for yourself?" The question seemed to overwhelm her. I don't know," she stammered. "No one has ever asked me that. I'm asking now," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to have a grand plan. Just one thing. The first thing that comes to your heart." Mash was silent for a long time, her violet eyes staring at the picture in the book. Then, in a small, hesitant voice, she spoke. "I want to see a flower field," she whispered. "A real one. I want to see all the different colors, and smell the fragrances, and maybe try to draw them. I think that would be nice." He smiled, a warm, reassuring expression that made her heart ache with a feeling she was only just beginning to understand. "A flower field," he repeated. "That is a wonderful place to start. I promise you, Mash. When this is done, I will take you to the most beautiful flower field in the world." In the quiet of the library, under the soft glow of the lamps, that promise felt more real and sacred than any scripture. It was a promise not just of survival, but of a life worth living. Naruto found Jalter in her self-proclaimed workshop, a repurposed storage bay that she had transformed into a chaotic reflection of her own soul. The room was hot, smelling of burnt ozone and quenched metal. The walls were covered in scorch marks and angry, charcoal sketches of dragons and burning saints. Half-finished weapons and pieces of jagged black armor lay scattered across workbenches. It was the forge of a fallen angel. She was in the center of the room, her back to him, a heavy smith's hammer in her hand. She was furiously pounding on a piece of glowing, dark metal, the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil echoing like a furious heartbeat. "Get out," she snarled without turning around. "Can't you see I'm busy forging my masterpiece of ultimate revenge?" Naruto ignored the command and walked further into the room, his eyes scanning her work. The piece of metal she was working on as imbued with a faint trace of her own unique energy, mixed with materials she had scavenged from defeated enemies. "A weapon designed to negate divine protection," he observed calmly. "You're trying to create something that can bypass my defenses." She slammed the hammer down one last time, the clang ringing with finality, and spun around to face him, her golden eyes blazing. "And what if I am? Are you here to stop me? To put your disobedient little monster back in her cage?" He simply stood there, his hands in his pockets, an island of calm in her sea of fury. "No, I'm here to ask why you bother." The question caught her off guard. "What? You are intelligent, Jalter," he said, his voice even. "You know that no weapon you forge can truly harm me. My power does not come from a divine blessing that can be negated. It is a part of me. So, I ask again, why do you bother?" The question stripped away her pretense, forcing her to confront the obsessive futility of her actions. Her rage flared, a desperate defense. "Because that's what I do. I am the Dragon Witch. I am hatred and vengeance incarnate. I exist to burn down everything good and holy. You, with your calm, your patience, you are infuriating goodness. You are everything I am supposed to destroy. So why," her voice cracked, the rage giving way to a raw, painful vulnerability, "why aren't you afraid of me? Why don't you hate me? Why do you keep looking at me like you understand?" The final question was a desperate shriek, the cry of a soul in turmoil. Naruto's expression softened. He finally understood the root of her obsession. It wasn't about defeating him. It was about eliciting a reaction from him that would validate her own existence as a monster. He took a step closer, and she flinched back, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her sword. "Because for the first half of my life," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "I had a monster of pure, unadulterated hatred sealed inside my soul. His rage was my constant companion. His whispers were the first thing I heard in the morning and the last thing I heard at night. I know what it feels like to be a vessel for a power you don't understand. To be defined by a hatred that isn't entirely your own." He looked directly into her blazing golden eyes. "Your fire, Jalter, it doesn't frighten me. In a strange way, it feels familiar. It feels like home." His words struck her with the force of a physical blow. She stared at him, her mouth slightly agape, her carefully constructed walls of rage and cynicism crumbling into dust. He wasn't pitying her. He wasn't trying to save her. He was offering her kinship. He was looking at her, the monster, the fake, the hateful witch, and seeing a reflection of himself. She had no response. The sarcastic retorts, the angry curses, they all died in her throat. For the first time, she was truly speechless, disarmed not by power, but by a profound and shocking empathy. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest, a confusing counterpoint to her usual cold fire. It was the grudging, terrifying, and undeniable feeling of being truly seen. In the stark white expanse of the training room, there was no need for words. Naruto stood opposite Scathach, both of them clad in simple training attire. They exchanged a single, sharp nod, an agreement, a challenge, and an acknowledgement of mutual respect. Then, the dance began. This was not the world-breaking duel of their first meeting. This was something more intimate, more refined. It was a high-speed conversation spoken in the language of martial arts. Scathach moved with the perfect, lethal grace she had honed over millennia, her practiced spear a crimson blur, each thrust and parry a testament to absolute mastery. Naruto was her opposite, a being of pure, unpredictable fluidity. His movements were like water, flowing and formless, adapting to her every attack, his limbs striking like a serpent from unexpected angles. He feinted with a kick, and she sidestepped, her spear's butt end jabbing at a pressure point in his back. He twisted, allowing the blow to glance off him while his hand snaked out to grab the spear's shaft. She released her grip, spinning into a powerful roundhouse kick. He ducked under it, his foot sweeping out to break her balance. She used the momentum to launch into an aerial flip, landing silently behind him. It was a breathtaking display. He would use a technique from a lost shinobi clan of his world. She would counter with a forgotten runic pattern that warped the space between them. He would form a truth-seeking orb into a shield to block a flurry of strikes. She would use her spear to vault over it, attacking from above. They were not trying to kill each other. They were learning, testing, pushing. They were two supreme masters delighting in the rare, exhilarating joy of having found a true peer. The spar ended as it began, with a nod. They stood in the center of the room, barely breathing heavily, the air around them crackling with residual energy. "Your taijutsu has no wasted movements," Scathach commented, her voice holding the deep satisfaction of a connoisseur. "But it is your unpredictability that is your greatest weapon. And your technique is flawless," Naruto replied, wiping a single bead of sweat from his brow. "But it is your ability to instantly adapt that flawless technique that makes you a true queen." There was no need for flirtation or flattery. Their profound connection was forged in this shared space, in the clash of spear against fist, in the perfect understanding that passed between two warriors at the absolute pinnacle of their art. For Scathach, this shared dance was more intimate than any embrace. Naruto found the Lion King, the servant Artoria Pendragon Lancer, summoned from the corrected Camelot singularity and now a permanent resident of Chaldea, on a quiet observation deck. The room's main viewport was programmed to show a slowly rotating, hyper-realistic view of the cosmos. A simple Go board sat on a low table between them. She was just as regal and divine as she had been in her holy city, but here, in the quiet of Chaldea, the coldness in her eyes seemed less like detachment and more like a profound, weary solitude. They played in silence for a time, the only sound the gentle click of polished stones on the wooden board. Her style was exactly as he expected. She built powerful, impenetrable walls of territory, perfect and unassailable. His style was fluid and invasive, creating small, seemingly weak groups in unexpected places, probing for weaknesses in her perfect formations. "Your strategy is unorthodox," she commented, her gaze fixed on the board, her voice a soft melody. "You sacrifice territory for influence. It is a high-risk approach." "A perfect wall with nothing inside is just a pretty prison," Naruto replied, placing a black stone in a move that subtly threatened one of her large groups. "A kingdom must have room to grow, to change, even if it means inviting risk." Their conversation was a continuation of their debate in Camelot, now played out in the metaphor of the game. "Growth invites chaos," she countered, placing a white stone to effortlessly defend her group. "Change invites decay. The ultimate duty of a king is to protect her people, even from themselves. A perfect, unchanging salvation is the only logical endpoint." "You see humanity as a problem to be solved," Naruto said, looking up from the board to meet her emerald gaze. "I see them as a story to be told. A story isn't interesting without conflict, without flawed characters who make mistakes and strive to be better. You wanted to write the final page, but you forgot that the best part is the journey of reading the book." She fell silent, contemplating his words. She looked from the game board, a map of their dueling philosophies, to his face. She saw no judgment there, only a deep, empathetic understanding. He was not condemning her for her choice in Camelot. He was simply offering a different perspective, one born from a sorrow that mirrored her own. "Perhaps," she said at last, her voice barely a whisper, "the ending I chose was too simple." In that quiet admission, in the shared stillness of the star-dusted room, a new bond was formed, one not of warrior to warrior, or of savior to saved, but of one lonely monarch to another. The final scene of the interlude played out in the brilliant, chaotic wonderland of Da Vinci's main workshop. She and Naruto were hunched over a new device on her workbench, a complex sphere of wires, crystals, and glowing conduits. "If my theory is correct," Naruto explained, pointing to a schematic he had drawn, A complex array of seals and symbols. We can create a fuinjutsu matrix that doesn't just seal chakra, but harmonizes it. It could help Mash consciously regulate the flow of Galahad's power, reducing the strain on her body. Yes, I see. Da Vinci exclaimed, her mind racing. A conceptual filter. Instead of a dam, it's a sorting gate. We can use a crystalline catalyst to amplify the user's intent and, oh, Maestro, you are a genius. We can integrate it directly into her shield's activation sequence. Their hands flew as they worked, a blur of perfect collaboration. He would explain a principle of yin-yang release from his world. She would immediately translate it into the mathematics of modern thaumaturgy. He would supply a precise amount of his own chakra to power a component. She would encase it in a perfectly calibrated containment field. Their minds were in perfect sync. A duet of creation. The work was fast, energetic, and filled with sparks of shared inspiration. When they finally finished, the device, a small, silver disc that hummed with a gentle, golden light, was a thing of beauty, a perfect fusion of his ancient art and her futuristic science. Let's test it, Naruto said, channeling a small, chaotic burst of energy towards it. The disc flared to life, and the chaotic energy was instantly smoothed out, tamed into a steady, rhythmic pulse. It worked. Perfectly. Magnifico. Da Vinci cried out, her face alight with triumphant joy. In a spontaneous burst of emotion, she threw her arms around Naruto's neck, pulling him into a tight, exuberant hug. We did it, partner. We made a little miracle. Naruto, initially surprised, relaxed into the embrace, a warm smile spreading across his face. He was surrounded by incredible women, each one a universe of her own, a hopeful knight, a vengeful witch, an eternal warrior, a lonely goddess, and a brilliant artist. And here, in this small, impossible sanctuary at the end of the world, he was no longer just the lonely sage of a dead planet. He was their center, their partner, their friend. He was home. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Babylonia, the Sage and the King of Heroes. The arrival in the seventh singularity was an immediate, overwhelming immersion into a world teeming with life. After the sterile, silent desert of Camelot, the sheer vitality of ancient Mesopotamia was a sensory shock. The air that filled their lungs was thick and humid, rich with the smell of fertile black earth, damp clay, and the sweet fragrance of date palms. They materialized in a lush, green river valley, where the twin rivers Tigris and Euphrates snaked across the landscape like veins of life-giving water. But this vibrant world was bleeding. The clear blue sky above was scarred by swarms of monstrous, winged creatures that flew in chaotic patterns, their distant shrieks a constant, unsettling chorus. On the horizon, the smoke of battle rose from the northern plains. The very air, for all its richness, vibrated with a palpable tension, the desperate energy of a civilization fighting for its last breath against an encroaching, inhuman tide. This place, it feels ancient, Mash said, her hand resting on her shield, her senses taking in the panorama of life and death. It feels like we're standing at the very beginning of history. And at its potential end, Scathach added, her ruby eyes narrowed as she tracked the flight patterns of the demonic beasts. The enemy is numerous, and they attack without strategy. Like a force of nature. A plague of locusts. A plague with a very pretty centerpiece, Jalter sneered, gesturing with her chin towards the horizon. Dominating the entire landscape was a city. Its sun-baked brick walls rising proudly from the earth. And from the center of that city rose a colossal structure, a multi-tiered ziggurat that clawed at the sky, a testament to the ambition and power of the king who had built it. Uruk, the energy signature of the Grail is faint here, suppressed, Naruto said, his eyes closed as his sage mode mapped the entire region. But the divine presence, it's overwhelming. Multiple gods, and something else, something older. A primordial force, sleeping fitfully beneath the earth. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto the distant ziggurat. And on that throne sits a man whose ego rivals the gods themselves. He is the key. Let's go. Their journey to Uruk was a gauntlet. They saw firsthand the desperation of the people. Farmers worked their fields with spears strapped to their backs. Children ran for the safety of their homes whenever the shadow of a demonic beast passed overhead. But there was no despair. In the faces of the people of Uruk, Naruto saw a stubborn, unbreakable resolve, a deep-seated faith in the king who protected them. When they finally reached the towering gates of the city, they were met not with hostility, but with an efficient, weary professionalism. The guards, recognizing them as powerful outsiders, escorted them through the bustling, vibrant streets, a city that refused to die, and into the heart of the ziggurat. To the throne room of the king. The hall was an exercise in opulent arrogance. Gold and lapis lazuli adorned the walls, treasures from 1,000 conquered lands were piled carelessly in corners. And a palpable aura of immense wealth and power permeated the air. On a massive golden throne at the far end of the room sat a man with golden hair, crimson eyes, and an expression of profound, divine boredom. He was clad in the robes of a caster, yet he carried the unmistakable air of an absolute monarch. This was Gilgamesh, the king of heroes. He watched them approach, his chin resting on his fist, his eyes scanning them with disdain. He looked at Mash's shield, at Scathach's spear, at Jalter's banner, his gaze cataloging their worth as if they were items in his treasury. When his eyes fell on Naruto, they lingered for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in their crimson depths before the mask of arrogance slammed back down. So, Gilgamesh's voice boomed, dripping with condescension. More mongrels have washed up on my shores, drawn to the light of my glory. Have you come to beg for my protection? To offer your meager services in exchange for the honor of breathing my air? Speak, and try not to waste my time. I have a civilization to run. Jalter bristled, her hand tightening on her sword hilt. Why, you arrogant little? Naruto put a calming hand on her shoulder before she could erupt. He stepped forward, his expression as calm and unimpressed as if he were addressing a petulant child, not the king of heroes. We are not here to beg, King of Uruk, Naruto said, his voice even and clear. Refusing to be intimidated. We are from an organization called Chaldea. We are here to resolve this singularity and correct the timeline. Gilgamesh threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming sound that was utterly devoid of humor. Chaldea, correct the timeline. You speak of grand ambitions, mongrel, yet you stand before me as nothing. You are footnotes in a history that I myself wrote. Your power, your weapons, your very existence are but pale imitations of the treasures locked within my gate of Babylon. Is that so? Naruto asked softly. He did not raise his voice. He did not flare his power in a grand display. He simply let the leash slip. Just for an instant, a fraction of the six paths sage mode's true nature was allowed to bleed into the room. It was not an aura of fire or electricity. It was a pressure, a change in the very fabric of reality within the throne room. The light seemed to bend around Naruto. The air grew heavy, thick, with the scent of ancient forests and primordial oceans. The treasures in the room hummed, the spirits within them resonating not with fear, but with a deep, instinctual reverence for a power that predated their own forging. It was the power of life itself, the energy of a planet, a presence that was at once divine and yet fundamentally different from the gods of this world. Gilgamesh's mocking smile vanished, his crimson eyes widened, the bored arrogance replaced by a sudden, sharp shock of disbelief. His own divine gift, Sha Nakba Imuru, the ability to see all truths, was screaming at him. It was showing him not the history of the man before him, but the nature of his being. It showed him a lonely god sitting on the dust of a dead world, a soul intertwined with the life force of an entire planet. A warrior who had fought and surpassed the very progenitors of divinity. He was seeing a being on his own level. Impossible, Gilgamesh whispered, his voice losing its bombast for the first time. He straightened up on his throne, his gaze now sharp, analytical, and utterly serious. What are you? I am Naruto Uzumaki, he replied simply, reining his presence back in. The oppressive pressure vanished, but the atmosphere in the room had irrevocably changed. And my power is not in your treasury, King of Heroes. The king was silent for a long, tense moment, his mind processing the revelation. He had built his entire identity on being the pinnacle, the one true king against whom all others were measured. To encounter another being who stood as his equal was a fundamental shock to his worldview. Very well. Naruto Uzumaki, Gilgamesh said, tasting the name, the word, mongrel, conspicuously absent. You possess a power that is interesting. But power alone is worthless without the wisdom to wield it. My kingdom is besieged by the children of the primordial goddess, Tiamat. My soldiers fight and die on the northern wall to protect the last light of civilization. Words are cheap. If you wish to prove your worth to me, go to the wall. Show me what this power of yours can do. Survive, contribute, and perhaps, if you do not die a dog's death, I will deign to speak with you again, not as a king to a mongrel, but as a king to a curiosity. The northern wall was a testament to the indomitable will of Uruk. It was a massive rampart of brick and stone stretching for miles. A defiant line drawn against the endless tide of chaos. But it was a line that was cracking. The Uruk soldiers were exhausted, their bronze armor dented, their eyes hollow with fatigue, yet they stood their ground with a courage that bordered on suicidal. Commanding this desperate front were two servants of incredible renown. The samurai general Yushiwakamaru, her movements a flash of brilliant swordplay, and the Spartan king Leonidas. His shield and his voice a bulwark against the enemy's charge. They greeted Naruto's party with a warrior's weary respect. More reinforcements from the king, Leonidas boomed. His voice a gravelly roar. Your timing is good. The beasts are gathering for another push. Naruto looked out from the top of the wall. The plains beyond were a seething mass of demonic beasts. And amongst them were the Lamu. They were grotesque, sanity-breaking abominations, with asymmetrical limbs, shrieking mouths, and an aura of pure, malevolent chaos. They were Tiamat's new children. Creatures designed to unmake civilization. Their numbers are endless, Yushiwakamaru said, her expression grim. And our wall is beginning to crumble. We are losing too many soldiers trying to repel them. Then we shall give them a wall that does not crumble, Naruto stated. He walked to the edge of the rampart, ignoring the shrieks of the approaching horde, and slammed his palms onto the stone. Wood style. Deep forest emergence. The ground behind the great wall erupted. The Uruk soldiers cried out in shock as massive, thick-limbed trees, larger than any they had ever seen, burst from the earth. They didn't grow randomly. They intertwined, their branches weaving together, their roots solidifying the very foundations of the existing wall. In less than a minute, a second, even larger wall of living, regenerating wood stood behind the stone rampart, complete with reinforced watchtowers, defensive spikes, and integrated platforms for archers. It was not just a wall, it was a living fortress. Leonidas and Yushiwakamaru stared, utterly speechless. Their king was a master of treasures, but this was an act of raw, large-scale creation they had never dreamed possible. Yuto then turned his attention to the barren fields behind the wall, fields that had been unable to grow crops due to the constant warfare. He walked into their center, placed his hands on the dry, cracked earth, and infused it with the pure life energy of yang release. A visible wave of soft green light spread from him, washing over the fields. The soil darkened, becoming rich and fertile. And then, miraculously, green shoots began to poke through the earth, growing at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. He wasn't just growing food, he was restoring hope. By the gods, one of the Uruk soldiers whispered, falling to his knees. He is a god of the harvest. A terrifying shriek from the plains announced the beginning of the assault. The Lamu swarmed the wall. Now, Naruto commanded, his voice ringing with authority. We show them the strength of Chaldea. What followed was a symphony of coordinated destruction. Mash planted her shield on the wall, creating an unbreakable defensive line that absorbed the brunt of the initial charge. Scathach became a crimson specter, leaping into the fray, her spear a blur that dispatched dozens of demonic beasts with every swing, her peerless skill inspiring the Uruk soldiers. Jalter, a cruel grin on her face, unleashed torrents of her black, nihilistic fire, finding a deep, satisfying catharsis in annihilating the grotesque Lamu. Burn, you disgusting freaks. She cackled, her flames a perfect counter to their chaotic nature. From the top of the new wooden wall, Lancer Artoria held her spear aloft, firing precise, devastating blasts of holy light that vaporized the larger, more powerful beasts before they could even reach the front line. Naruto himself moved along the wall, a commander directing his forces. When a group of Lamu, with strange magical abilities appeared, he would form a seal. Sealing jutsu. 4 symbols seal. A complex array of glowing characters would appear on the ground, trapping the creatures in an unbreakable prison, neutralizing them for later study without risking a single soldier. His tactical acumen was as potent as any weapon, turning the chaotic battle into a controlled, efficient defense. From the highest chamber of his ziggurat, Gilgamesh watched. A large, golden scrying dish filled with water showed him the events at the northern wall with perfect clarity. Beside him, his faithful and intelligent attendant, Siduri, watched with wide, hopeful eyes. At first, Gilgamesh was merely impressed. The wood-style wall was a novelty, a powerful act of creation he could admit was beyond him. But then he saw the fields. He saw Naruto breathe life back into the dead earth, a direct contribution to the prosperity and stability of his kingdom, the ultimate duty of a king. A flicker of genuine shock crossed his face. He does not merely build, my king, Siduri said, her voice filled with awe. He cultivates. Gilgamesh didn't answer. He watched as Naruto's team worked in perfect concert, disparate powers weaving together to form an impenetrable defense. He saw the efficiency, the strategy, the way Naruto used his power not just to destroy, but to contain and neutralize. He was not seeing a simple warrior. He was seeing a leader of men, a master of strategy, a being who understood that true strength lay not in what you could destroy, but in what you could protect and build. He is not a king of possession. Gilgamesh murmured, more to himself than to Siduri. His treasury is not filled with weapons, but with ideas. With possibilities. He leaned forward, his crimson eyes gleaming with a newfound, intense respect. He is a king of cultivation. How utterly, infuriatingly interesting. The final assault of the day was the largest. A colossal demonic beast, a true behemoth from the age of gods, led a wave of thousands. The ground shook with its approach. Yoshiwakamaru prepared for a suicide charge. Leonidas readied his men for a glorious last stand. But Naruto simply raised a hand. Hold your positions, he commanded. He looked at his team and gave a series of sharp, quick orders. Mash, shield wall, full power. Jalter, focus your fire on the smaller beasts to her left flank. Scathach, to the right. Artoria, the big one is yours. On my signal. Mash slammed her shield down, the concept of Lord Camelot manifesting as a brilliant, shining wall. Jalter and Scathach, became blurs of fire and crimson light, carving through the flanks of the army. Now, Artoria, Naruto yelled. Lancer Artoria, standing on the highest wooden tower, held Rongomainiad high. The light of the world's end, she intoned, her voice ringing with divine power. Rongomainiad, a pillar of pure, holy light, a torrent of energy from the very edge of reality, shot down from the heavens and struck the colossal beast. The creature dissolved into dust and light, its terrifying roar silenced forever. The wave of enemies, their leader destroyed, faltered in confusion. Naruto's strategy had broken them completely. As the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Naruto stood on the new wooden wall, surveying the silent battlefield. The day was won. A shower of golden particles materialized beside him, coalescing into the form of Gilgamesh. The king of heroes was no longer on his throne, but here, on the front lines. The arrogance was gone from his face, replaced by a look of genuine, grudging admiration. You have surpassed my expectations, Uzumaki Naruto, he said, the use of his full name a clear sign of respect. I have observed your methods. You have fortified my walls, fed my people, and protected my soldiers, all without asking for a single thing from my treasury. He looked at Naruto, a faint, rare smile on his lips. Your kingship is unorthodox, but it is effective. He held out a hand, not in a gesture of dominance, but of partnership. Let us speak, king to king, Gilgamesh said, his voice resonating with a new sense of purpose. The time for tests is over. The time to fight for our Uruk, for our world, has begun. Naruto met his gaze and accepted the offered hand, his grip firm. The King of Gold and the Sage of Six Paths stood together on the wall. Two vastly different rulers united by a single purpose. The primordial mother was stirring, but for the first time, Uruk had two kings to stand against her. Chapter 8 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.